Happy Wednesday. It's Hump Day. Thank you for joining us here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturdivant. Right across from me is super producer Carlene Bragg.
Hi, everybody.
It's a beautiful, cloudy Wednesday.
It's a cloudy one.
It's a cloudy one. It still feels great outside.
It does
though.
feel nice.
Feels great. You have to take advantage of these days.
I haven't been out there since 7 o'clock this morning, but it felt nice at 7 o'clock this morning.
Take my word for it.
Yeah,
it feels
you're gonna have
great.
to tell me.
You know, it's one of those days you have to be thankful for because when it does get really hot outside in the Carolinas,
yeah,
it's it's another story.
Mm-hmm.
So and look, we'll get into the forecast a little bit later. But thank you again for joining us here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. We have a lot going on, but we want to start with the conclave, the Papal Conclave. It is underway right now. So if you were watching WCNC Charlotte, you saw the special coverage from NBC taking you through the mass that happened this morning, the ceremonies, and now the Sistine Chapel is taped off. Is this is video from earlier?
These are just live images from around St. Peter's Square.
Okay, these are live images from
all around the Vatican
all
City.
around the Vatican City. So here's what NBC News has. Again, the conclave is underway. 133 red-robed cardinals from around the world are filed into the Sistine Chapel. And again, you saw the choir, the music. And this is a centuries-old tradition, the conclave, that is, to elect a new head of the Catholic Church. And again, it is underway. The cardinal electors, or cardinals under 80 years old, will be barred from leaving or having any contact with the outside world. Again, these are just live images outside of or around Vatican City, St. Peter's Square. We're going to show you, this is Smokestack. So how it goes: we see white, we have a new pope. Mm-hmm. We see black, there hasn't been a consensus on who the next pope is.
Correct.
So we are keeping an eye on that, and we're going to keep that in a small box in the corner, just in case. We don't know. But look, I'm giving you a rundown of this process of the conclave, and I thought it was important because WCNC Charlotte's Megan Bragg is you've been covering this a lot.
I know.
On top of everything else that you cover and
Absolutely,
do.
yeah.
So what should folks know? I mean, I know that's a very generic question.
Absolutely. I mean, this is absolutely so fun and incredible to watch. I know from just like, if you're not Catholic either, it's a centuries old process. So it's really, really cool. But like you were saying, they're locked away behind the Sistine Chapel right now. They're not allowed to talk. They're just really allowed to vote. And that's what they're going to be doing today, is putting in their ballots of who they want the next pope to be. Now, usually how this works is we probably won't see a new pope today. Kind of how the process is they'll kind of give cardinals who have been there for a while, who have pristine in the church, they'll throw them some honorary votes, right, to just give respect to those who are higher up in the ranks. And then you'll see, some front runners, and the process goes on and on. What's really important is when they get together for those meals, because that's when they're going to talk and figure out who is going to be the next pope. But 2/3 needs to have a consensus on this in order to elect the next pope. So that's 80%. So they all have to be, kind of in one. 80% of them do, yeah.
And from my understanding, like today, obviously we saw the mass, but you're talking about 130 some odd cardinals coming together from every continent.
Exactly.
And they have to get to know each other, right?
They really do have to get to know each other. And what I find interesting too is, and this is a question that I have, I'm sure all of them know some sort of Italian or something, but they're from all around the country, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to have some language barriers, I would suspect, or I'm sure they all know, a good amount of something, but it's probably not as easy as it is, and kind of like, I mean, politically, we have conservative and more liberal, and there are popes that are more conservative with what they want the church to look like, and more liberal on what they want the church to look like. So it will be interesting to see who the next pope will be, and kind of how they figure that out, because we've talked about some front runners before, but we'll just have to see. There are a couple things that are interesting too, that we've gotten questions on, like, can anyone be pope? And
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and it's something that we're looking into. And as Verify goes, people ask us questions and we find answers for them. But canon law, which is basically the law for, Catholic, I don't want to say, it's not the Bible, obviously, but it's like the Constitution, I want to say. Like, but canon law says that an unmarried Catholic Baptist man is eligible to be pope. So any unmarried Catholic baptized man. However, in the last 600 years, only cardinals have been popes. So it's not like, Joe Schmo off the street is going to be elected as pope. But so 600 years, only cardinals have been elected. Another thing is the first thing that the pope will do is change their name. That's their first action.
Okay.
And that's kind of like a, ceremonial thing, who they think is like a saint, or, a person who they want to be called after. St. Francis, all of those. And so they do that as the first step, but it's an option. They can keep their name, but in the last 470 years, everyone's changed their name. So it's really a symbolism of, changing the name, and you are now pope.
It's kind of like the royals. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They can keep, they have to have a name. Or
I did not know that.
Yeah, not all of them go by their name.
Oh, wow.
Elizabeth did. And Charles.
Yeah, so St.
Yeah.
Francis' name wasn't really,
Yes.
Francis, or not St. Francis, I'm sorry, Pope Francis. So it's really cool. A lot of ceremonial things that have dated back, centuries, which is probably honestly, one of the coolest things. I think I'm huge in history, so I think this is super, super cool that they continue these traditions.
It's like history meets sort of today, because I'm looking at the coverage before they go into a conclave, and you see the paparazzi, you see the selfies, you see the reporters talking to the cardinals on the street. And I can only imagine that obviously that was not happening.
No, and I'm sure
ago.
in some sort of way, back in the day, there was probably people going up and whispering and whatever. I just think it's really cool that we do continue to do something like this. And yeah, like you said, it's kind of history meets today, where, the selfies and the everything like that. But it is really a big deal, especially for, people who are Catholic and really look to the Pope. So it'll be interesting to see who they pick. And the process is, really fun. You got a lot of people out there right now just watching that smokestack. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
I think about for some people, you go back to Pope John Paul II. I mean, he was Pope from 1978 to 2005.
Right.
So for some folks, that wasn't even in your lifetime.
Exactly.
And now you've probably had two conclaves, including this one in addition to. So it's just.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I think it's cool to even watch the process, especially play out on TV and online, and how we've been showing it. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, we have a shot of Vatican City. We're waiting for whatever smoke comes out.
Yeah, most likely it'll be black.
Yeah.
And then they'll go into that second day, and we'll see what happens there.
And so it comes out every day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yep.
Okay, as I always say.
Yeah.
I get a little smarter.
A little smarter.
I get a little smarter. With
this
Megan
will be
Brett.
on at 6:15, by the way. I knew you were going to ask me that, so.
Thank you.
I'm one step ahead of you.
I appreciate it, Meg.
Yeah,
all right, Meg. Thank you for your time. Again, Meg will be on at 6:15. Her story will run. You can catch it, obviously, on our website, WCNC.com. And then you can check out our app, WCNC Charlotte mobile app. All right. So we want to, we talked about the weather. Cloudy, what a nice day. Well, let's bring in Majestic Storm, new meteorologist Majestic Storm,
Yep.
with a look at a forecast.
You know, it is just a mainly cloudy day today. Although those temperatures are pretty comfortable, we're not looking at a whole lot of sunshine today, unfortunately. So mainly cloudy and dry. One of those days where it looks like it's going to rain, but our rain chances overall across the Carolinas really are rather low. Rain chances do start to increase, so as we're heading through Thursday night and especially into those early morning hours on Friday. And then this weekend, cloudy skies with more opportunities for some rain showers to move in. You can see our Monroe camera here. Those are our daytime highs this afternoon, so still quite comfortable. Upper 60s for our mountain counties, and then mainly into the 70s across the Charlotte metro area. And again, a stray shower or two, not out of the question, but as you look at the satellite and radar, it's a little confusing. It looks like it should be raining for a lot of us, but really we do have a lot of dry air out there, so a lot of the rain just isn't making it to the ground. Let's track this out for you. Our futurecast for the rest of our Wednesday. Still, models are showing that we should get some rain, but again, we have a lot of dry air in place. Now, I'm not saying we won't get a random stray shower or two, but for the most part, any widespread rain, that's just not going to happen today. That's not the weather story today, although it could be in the next couple of days, which we need some rain. As we're looking at that 5 o'clock hour, right around dinner time or so, as we're looking at I-77, I-85, not seeing any major concerns. Again, a few raindrops for your commute home after work, not out of the question, but we are watching for an active weather pattern. It's going to be comfortable today, although I can't promise you a whole lot of sunshine. It does start to become a little bit more uncomfortable as we're heading through Thursday and Friday, and it's because we'll have more moisture in the air. It'll become a bit more humid, but that's really fuel for storms that could start to develop, and we're concerned that on Thursday, late afternoon, evening hours, and even into the overnight hours, some storms may form, and they may have the ingredients to quickly become strong to severe. Storm Prediction Center does have most of our area under a low-level threat for some severe storms, and if any of those storms do turn severe, we'll be watching for a hail and a wind concern. We're not concerned about any tornadic activity, and really the window is open for the strongest storms to develop really between about 7 o'clock and 10 p.m. We'll be watching for really hail, strong winds, and brief but heavy downpours in addition to some frequent lightning. Now, as we're looking at Thursday, the morning time seems all right. It's going to be into the afternoon and evening, and really a lot of these models, they're just having a hard time picking up on that system. But the WCNC weather team, we've been watching this system very carefully, and between about 7 o'clock and 10 p.m. Tomorrow night will be the best time frame. But some of those lingering impacts may impact your Friday morning commute as well, with more rain showers on the way. So we may need to send those kids off to the school bus with an umbrella as well. Now, this upcoming weekend, we do have quite a bit of cloud coverage, some small rain activity, but it's not just a normal weekend. This is our Mother's Day weekend, of course. Temperatures should be actually quite comfortable, about a 20% chance for a stray shower or two. And really, as far as any washout potential goes, it doesn't seem like it's going to be until early next week. That's when we could actually get some much needed rain. Here's our 7-day forecast. You can see it here. For our daytime highs today, let's plan for some low to mid 70s, a little warmer for our Thursday, but really that could be some fuel for some possible storms. That's why it is going to be a weather alert day. And then this upcoming weekend, Lisa, upper 60s, low 70s, not too bad, but early next week could be quite rainy.
And that is Majestic Storm's forecast. It looks like a lovely Mother's Day day for a lot of folks planning to celebrate their moms. All right, so we want to shift now to Washington, D.C., where the House Education and Workforce Committee is holding a hearing right now. It's titled Beyond the Ivy League, Stopping the Spread of Anti-Semitism on American Campuses. So we want to give that to you now. Oh. Push it up. Push the wrong. I pushed you up on camera. I'm sorry. Here you go. This is a live look at that hearing that's taking place right now.
Representative, we do not ask.
You must have an
that
idea.
question.
You must have an idea. You talk
our
to people.
faculty.
You have no idea. No idea. We don't know. Maybe 80% were for Trump. You have no idea. Not even in the individual department you have any idea.
I do not, and I'm not interested in that kind
I
of
don't believe
information.
that, but okay, you can say that. How about Mr. Manuel?
Thank you. Like Haverford, we don't track
I know you don't try,
About
but you must have an opinion. You talk to
1,200
people.
faculty on campus, and I can tell you that our practices have protected both conservative and progressive voices in our work.
You have no idea. Okay. Mr. Armstrong, I mean, you must talk to people. Everybody talks about the election last October. Do you feel you have kind of a angling to the left side big time on your campus there in California?
We have the vast majority of our faculty and staff. They really focus on student success. We have a high STEM population.
Nobody wants to take a crack at it. Well, okay. I think the problem that we have anti-Semitism on the campus is because odd, offbeat, hateful ideas fester in a place of extreme leftism, and I think the universities in this country have become fanatical left-wingists, and I don't know what we can do about it as a country. We're going to have to talk and see what we can do about it, because we sure funnel money into the universities, and I don't
Thank
think
the gentleman.
kids are getting
Time has
all
expired. Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, can you say what the effect on effectively addressing anti-Semitism is when you ignore race, national origin, disability, gender, and other religion forms of hate?
Well, you're not addressing the problem in a neutral, across-the-board way, and that calls into question the genuineness of your concern for discrimination.
Thank you. You talked about the hearings like this being problematic because there's been no factual investigation. Jobs have been threatened. Can you say another word about why we do an actual investigation rather than hearings like this?
Yeah, the line between protected speech that is anti-Semitic and discrimination that is anti-Semitic is a hard line to draw. But it's a line that our Constitution compels us to draw. It's not a line that I've heard a single Republican care about on this committee, but it's a line that the Constitution requires us to draw. And how do you draw that line? You engage in close consideration of all the facts and circumstances around an incident. You don't just take a letter from a student. You call in the student. You call in other people who witnessed the incident. You determine what actually happened based on often competing accounts. And then you make a determination based upon those facts. That's what faculty committees do when they consider these kinds of complaints. That's what OCR did until it was decimated by this administration. That is not what I have seen this committee do in 8 hearings. I haven't seen them do that in a single instance. And instead, all they've done is bring in presidents and berate them based on the committee's version of the facts, which may or may not be true.
Thank you. And you've made the point that you have complaint and blame without facts to cut back on Office of Civil Rights. Are you familiar with the Community Relations Service at Department of Justice?
Absolutely.
How could they be helpful?
They're helpful because they were designed to affirmatively, proactively get at discrimination by getting people to work together, by supporting, not by prosecuting, but by going in and affirmatively supporting areas and communities where there is division. That's what we need. We don't need, speechifying by Republicans. We need actual efforts on the ground to deal with the problem.
And of course, that's under attack, and in the president's budget, it seems to be left out.
Absolutely.
I would ask the presidents, the first question that was posed to you was something along the lines of, insofar as each of your campuses are hotbeds of anti-Semitism, can you give us some statistics? I forget what the rest of the question was. Each of you went right to the statistics and left us to assume that you agreed with the premise that your campuses were hotbeds of anti-Semitism. Anybody want to make a quick comment on whether or not that assumption is accurate?
That is not a description that I would use.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Manuel?
I would not use that description either, and I would note that our retention rates for Jewish students are up slightly over 5 years, as are our
Well, I'm just talking about the question. You let it slide by. Dr. Armstrong?
No, I would not agree with that statement.
And Mr. Colin, last minute, can you just say a word about the tension between free speech and when it gets into, speech can get into criminal law, violation of Title VI, and possible campus code violations?
Again, the reason that Title VI has very high standards for when speech actually constitutes discrimination is because the Constitution protects all kinds of hateful speech. We can condemn that speech, we should condemn that speech, but we can't punish people for engaging in that speech. That's why Title VI says it's not discrimination to say something criticizing Israel at a protest. It is discrimination if you target a particular individual because of his Jewish identity for individually targeted harassment. And it's a violation of Title VI if the university is deliberately indifferent to that, meaning they ignore the problem. I haven't heard any evidence.
And what is the hostile environment?
Hostile environment is only where the speech is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it denies equal access to education, a standard that is extraordinarily high, has rarely been met in any case in this country. And again, it's because if you define discrimination through speech too broadly, you chill speech. And that is precisely what this effort of this committee has done, is to chill speech.
The
Speech that
gentleman's time has
criticizes
expired
Israel
again.
is protected.
And we will move on.
Thank you.
Mr. Cole, you've made your point pretty clear several times. So
Thank you.
I now recognize, I don't agree with it, but I now recognize gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Rulli.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I know it can't be easy to be on that side. This is not a persecution. This is a learning curve, and I have to condemn the other side of the aisle that dilute the fact that this is about October 7th and anti-Semitism. I live about 38 miles away from Kent State University. We just had our observation of the anniversary of the shooting. The Boardman girl that was 18 that got killed shopped in my family's stores. It's very personal to us. In my political world and in my philosophy of life, we celebrate protesting. There is nothing wrong with protesting. It's what our country is based on by the founders. However, there's a difference between protesting and safety. And there's a difference between protesting and highlighting anti-Semitism. I think that, you know, when we were raised, and we're all probably in close to the same age bracket, when we were raised and we were in high school and we were in college, we were heard a phrase calling never again. But now the four of you are at the heights of power, and never again happens to be right now. And we all saw the videos on TV, on YouTube. They're there right now. I can pull them up on my phone. And Harvard Square, when I went to school at Emerson, so I was in Boston. I know Harvard Square really well, where literally Jewish kids were afraid to go to school, that were pushed on the ground, and they were harassed. Now, when I was in the Ohio Senate, I dealt with President Carter of the Ohio State University, and we had meetings with him before the protests, which he allowed to happen, which were very safe. Nobody was threatened. The campus was cleaned up, and I think the Palestinian protesters did a great job of their protesting. However, a lot of these universities throughout this country have not performed like that. So my focus goes to Dr. Emanuel, and like I said, this is more of a learning curve. I don't want you to feel that we're here to persecute you, but I do want to do better. So when we look to Mr. Emanuel, and we look at your university, and we look at the reflection on it, police reports have that 17-day encampment was allowed with over 1,000 submitted complaints, including reports of safety concerns, harassment concerns, threat of violence to Jewish students, and even several death threats. Individuals allegedly threatened to slit the throats of Jewish students supporting Israel. Allowed faculty members, if I'm saying her name right, Leila Farah, who supported the release of a terrorist that killed people in Jerusalem, and to serve as an advisory to SJB. Did not clear the encampments until 5 days after negotiations with the leaders broke down. Having said all that, what would you do different, and from the heart, how can we do better? Because I think, hey, listen, we all have concerns for everyone that goes to your school, both, you know, if they're pro-Palestine or if they're pro-Jewish. But how do we do better? How do we make Jewish kids feel safe to go to your school in the future?
Thank you for that question, and I appreciate the time to explain. We needed to do better. In our review, we understood that the length of time of that encampment created dangers. The numbers that you referenced in the end was a website that I released to show the community the dangers of what were happening in that space. We worked with, after the fact, we worked with the Jewish United Fund, with Chicago's Metro Hillel, and with many of our own Jewish faculty, staff, and students to understand how we could be better at creating a culture of compliance. This included creating a Jewish alumni group, a Jewish faculty staff alliance, working on time, place, and manner restrictions, figuring out that we need to do training using that data in that website to help people understand the modern interpretation of anti-Semitism. I admit thoroughly that we could do better, and I know that with our changes today, the results of a future encampment would be different. I would also end, if you give me the time, to say, since that moment, we have prevented overtakes of our campus by outside protesters, and we have a better sense of how to manage the balance between the protest and the safety and the welcomingness of our campus.
I truly respect and appreciate that response, and with that, I yield my time back to the chair.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank the panel for being here today. It's not whether we agree or disagree. It's the fact you're here. We appreciate that fact. It's been long. It's been arduous. It's been emotional. But it has been purposeful, and I'll get to that in my closing statement, but now I recognize the ranking member, my friend from Virginia, Mr. Scott, for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Comments have been made about whether or not this is just happening on campus. I'd like to enter into the record a press release from the ADL entitled U.S. Anti-Semitic Incidents Skyrocketed 360% in the aftermath of the attack on Israel, according to the latest ADL data. The release makes it clear that the majority of incidents that the ADL tracked, over 75%, happened in places other than college campuses. And also, I'd like to enter into the record an NBC News article, quote, January 6th rioter in, quote, Camp Auschwitz, unquote, hoodie, sentenced to 75 days in prison.
Without objection, the articles be
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank our witnesses for being here today. Today marks the 8th time the committee has held a hearing on anti-Semitism since October 7th, yet in all that time, there's been no concrete action to actually protect any students from discrimination. Despite my multiple requests in that time, we've held no hearings on other forms of hate and discrimination, such as racism, Islamophobia, sexism in violation of Title IX, homophobia, or challenges of students with disabilities, all of which also pose major problems for students. So here we are again, complaining about the problem without offering real solutions. All the while, the administration ignores due process and takes a chainsaw to the Office of Civil Rights, the very office responsible.
You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturtevant. We want to shift away from that House hearing on anti-Semitism on college campuses to bring you big news across the nation. I mean, it's a Real ID. We say deadline, so let me clarify. When we say Real ID deadline, this is the point, and today starts where they enforce.
This is day one of enforcement.
Day one of enforcement. So Real ID requirements for those flying within the United States begin today. And this is after nearly, and I didn't realize this until today, 2 decades of delays. So they've been pushing this back for a while. And so there are a lot of folks packing the DMV. There are a lot of folks trying to get this Real ID. It's caused a scramble. So yes, it impacts going into federal buildings. Flights. And so, yeah, obviously it's a big point of concern. And we had Megan Bragg on yesterday breaking that down for us. We have Anna King, who is live at Charlotte Douglas Airport right now. And again, the Real ID impacts folks flying. So Anna, you've been at the airport since this morning. How's it looking out there?
Well, you said it perfectly. This has caused some scrambling. I've spoken to people who told me they do not have their ID just yet, but if you take a look behind me, the lines here, they're starting to pile a little bit, but they, for the most part, all day, they've been moving pretty smoothly. Now, airport officials did tell me they prepared for this ahead of time, working with TSA and ensuring ensuring there were people here to answer any questions travelers may have. Now, again, I did speak with some people who told me they do not have their real ID, and they said it's been a hassle trying to get here early and ensure they can still board. Now, again, if you look right here, there are signs all around the airport reminding people of this update, saying without that ID or proper documentation starting today, you may be denied access through the checkpoint. You could be subject to additional security measures or experience delays. And that's why they are encouraging people to get here at least 3 hours before your flight time, just to ensure that if you do not have that star on your ID, you can possibly still board. But again, like I said, things here are moving smoothly for the most part, and there are people on standby to answer any questions people may have here. Nick.
And Anna, before I let you go, have you been able to talk to anybody that doesn't have their real ID, made their way to the airport and possibly tried their luck?
I did. I spoke to one lady who did not have her real ID. She also does not have a passport. So she said it was a real hassle today trying to find someone to answer her questions. But she did get here super early, just so that way she could use her ID to get through the line here and actually board her flight. So it is possible, but they are encouraging people to get here at least 3 hours early.
Some good advice there. All right, Anna, thank you for your time. Again, Anna King is there at the airport covering that real ID deadline enforcement. You heard it there. There was one lady who was didn't have a real ID, didn't have a passport, but was able to get to the airport hours in advance, which is, look, if you don't have your real ID, that is important to do. Make sure you get there early. And so I want to read what we have right now on our website. So Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said yesterday, and she assured people who don't have a real ID but need to take a domestic flight that they will be able to fly after clearing additional identity checks. So there is some sort of grace period. Again, we had Megan Bragg on yesterday talking about that grace period and talking about things you should know when it comes to real ID. And look, we have all that information, a full breakdown right now on our website, WCNC.com, and also inside our app, WCNC Charlotte mobile app. All right, so we want to shift back now to Washington, D.C. We brought you this earlier. This is a hearing that actually the House Education and Workforce Committee holding a hearing titled Beyond the Ivy League, Stopping the Spread of Anti-Semitism on American Campuses. Let's take a listen to it.
We are seeing campuses around the United States taking action. And I thank the two campuses here today, DePaul and Cal Poly, for being able to demonstrate, at least in words, and of course we were looking for the policy and the outcomes, but you were able to tell us of mistakes and now what you're doing to remedy that. We wish you all well. For the good of this country, we need academic institutions that allow freedom of speech, but opportunity to experience it equally like all other students on campus, regardless of who you are, where you come from, your nationality, your gender, your faith. Sadly, we've seen the education of college students hindered far too often. And in this case, the hearing was on anti-Semitic disruptions, the blocking of access to buildings, the interruption of lectures, hateful, violent slogans that were put in place to incite violence, not just free speech. We've heard today of some modest changes made in recent months. We want them to be meaningful. But meaningful accountability means taking the risk of being unpopular and asking hard questions. Yes, it was passionate today. Sometimes it was emotional. I get that. But at least on this side of the aisle, we're taking it in a significant, meaningful, and purposeful way. And I would expect that a majority of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle take it purposeful as well. Hard decisions have to take place. We're wishing you success. We'll be watching. And I hope we'll be watching other universities and colleges around this country also saying, I don't want to be part of the problem. I'm going to take the example of what's gone on in our 8 hearings, and we'll work for change as well, so that all students, those who come on a visa or those who have been blessed beyond measure to be born here as part of this great American experiment, that will all experience academic freedom and greater opportunity in the future. And so I thank you. I thank you for being here today. I thank you to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. And being that there is no further action to be taken, the hearing is adjourned.
All right, it looks like that hearing has adjourned for the day. So we're going to shift gears. So we were talking about it earlier. We had Megan Bragg on to talk about the process of the conclave. The conclave is underway. We showed that mass here on Live Impact News this morning. And this is a live look at the Vatican right now. And so look, how it works. If there's white smoke, we have a new pope. If there's black smoke, voting continues. And there hasn't been a consensus on a new pope. But again, we had that mass this morning through our midday. We actually pushed midday back slightly, and we came on, if you notice, we got on at 1 o'clock because of that NBC special report. So speaking of NBC, we want to send it over to NBC's Jay Gray, who has more on the conclave. He was on this morning on our morning stream from 7 to 9. Let's take a listen in.
Good morning, Jay.
Good morning. How are you ladies?
We are doing so well. I'm wondering, do you have any insight for how long the conclave could last?
It's interesting. I mean, highly secretive, obviously all taking place behind those huge wooden doors locked on the Sistine Chapel. If you look at modern history, the longest has been 5 days and most average a day and a half, 2 days. We've talked with some of the cardinals earlier in the week before this conclave began, and they've been saying 2 to 3 days. So it'll be interesting to see if there are any sticking points, if this takes a bit longer, or if they already have an idea of the direction they want this church to go and the man they want to lead it. We won't know until we see the white smoke. But again, most believe this is going to be a short conclave.
And Jay, you mentioned, of course, that this is a highly secretive process. I mean, anyone knows what happens behind those closed doors. Can you walk us through that? And also, a number of people are going to be waiting. Could be a vote as early as today.
Yeah, they'll have one vote this afternoon after they take their oath. And during that process, inside the Sistine Chapel, there is silence. No one speaks. There's no going back and forth. The only sound that is heard is the counting of the votes. So the time to discuss, the time to get to know one another, that's ended for the most part. Now, when they get into a regular routine, one vote today, there's never been an election on the first vote. So you get into the full day tomorrow, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and in those break times, they can again try and steer the conversation to where they think this is going to end up. In the evenings, I'm told there is no curfew. They can talk and visit as long as they would like before the next day's vote.
Now, you mentioned this could be a turning point for the church. What makes this conclave different from past elections?
Well, I think what makes it different is the Pope that was in office before all of this. Pope Francis, loved by so many, and really changed some of the norms within the Catholic Church. Brought in those who had been disenfranchised at times, that didn't have a place they felt in the church. Also opened up some of the church leadership to women, which is something we haven't seen in the Catholic Church. So the rub comes with whether they're going to continue along that path, or some of the conservative cardinals have mentioned, if they're going to revert back to some of the traditions and some of the norms of the Catholic Church that it's carried for centuries and centuries. So if there's a tug of war inside this conclave, I think it'll be over that.
And what also makes this interesting is that this is the largest group ever of cardinals, and most of them have never participated in this process before. So how could that influence the outcome?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And many of them don't know each other. They've had some time pre-conclave to kind of get to know each other. But a vast majority, 108 of these cardinals, have never been a part of the process. So they're kind of learning on the job, if you will. And they'll get a real taste of it this afternoon when they take their oath and then cast that first ballot.
All right, NBC's Jay Gray. Jay, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, guys.
And that was NBC's Jay Gray breaking down the conclave. Again, today is day one of the conclave, and we will keep this shot on the bottom of your screen as we look for some sort of signal from the Cardinals there. All right, so we want to send it now to D.C., where right now, happening live, President Donald Trump is swearing in former Senator from Georgia, David Perdue, as his ambassador to China, as the administration prepares to meet with Chinese officials on trade and economic matters. This, of course, as there is some tariff tensions between China. So let's listen in to this swearing-in ceremony.
We're not going to have days off because we don't have enough days in the year. We have too many celebrations already. But we're going to have Victory Day and first World War I, World War II, and without us, those wars would not have been won. I think we can say that, would not have been won. And I think it's time that the United States starts taking credit for their achievements. And I really believe it's a shame. You know, I was watching for the last week, and I noticed France, I noticed other countries all getting ready for Victory Day. And I said, that's sort of strange, because David just added something. He said, we also rebuilt the world. And I didn't have that, and I should have that. That was a big factor. But I noticed all of the countries, Russia, having a big day tomorrow. And by the way, they lost millions of people, and they were absolutely a major factor. But there was no major factor like us. We won the war. And we won it with the help of others. But everybody was celebrating but the United States of America. And I said, you know, I think it's time that we start celebrating victory. And that's what we're doing. So now for the reason that we're here, but I asked David, would it be appropriate if I did that? He said, absolutely. That's a big thing that we're doing on your swearing in. Very big thing. But now for the real reason, and a reason that I'm very proud of, because he's been my friend for a long time. We're swearing in our next ambassador to the People's Republic of China. What timing, David, what timing? Only you could have picked this timing. It's your fault. I picked him a long time ago, but it just happened to come due on a pretty important date. But our friend David Perdue, Senator David Perdue, joining David this afternoon are his incredible wife, Bonnie, been at his side for a long time. Their sons, David and Blake, their daughter-in-law, Danielle, and daughter-in-law, Charlotte, and their grandsons, David, Hudson, and Jack. That's a beautiful family. Congratulations. I didn't think you had it in you, David. That's really something. That's pretty amazing. Look at that. Our new ambassador brings to this position a lifetime of experience at the highest levels of business and politics, and he is at the highest level. Over 4 decades in business, he rose to lead several major American corporations, including as the president and CEO of the footwear giant Reebok, where he did very well, he did a great job, and later CEO of Dollar General. Likewise, he did a great job. David also lived and worked in Singapore and Hong Kong for several years, developing a wealth of experience negotiating and doing tremendous business deals for lots of different leaders that he worked with. Following his tremendous business success as an executive, David stepped forward to serve America in government, and as we all know, in 2014 he was elected United States Senate in Georgia, and he was very popular, very respected from day one. He served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and was a tremendous partner to our administration during my first term. I dealt with him a lot, and he solved a lot of problems. Now I'm entrusting David to help manage one of America's most complex and consequential foreign relationships, and I know he'll do a fantastic job. As our lead diplomat in Beijing, David will work to promote American interests and stability in the Indo-Pacific, help stop the flood of Chinese fentanyl across our borders, which we have to do. We lost, I believe, 300,000 people last year. Seek fairness and reciprocity for the American worker, ensure the safety of our citizens overseas, and promote peace in the region and in the world. And I'm confident that he will do an exceptional job. He's an exceptional man, and make our country very proud and make our country very safe, too. So, David, I want to congratulate you. This is as big as it gets, and the timing is unbelievable, but it's time that we have somebody like this. This is a very, very extraordinary man, and you're going to do a fantastic job. And say hello to President Xi when you're over there, please, okay? Thank you very much. Marco, would you do the service? Thank you.
Put your left hand and raise your right. Raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, David Perdue,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the same,
to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well
and that I will well
and faithfully discharge
and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
on which I am about to enter.
in which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
David, would you like to say something?
Mr. President, I'm humbled to be in this office today. I love what you've done with this office. I like the Declaration of Independence. I want the world to know that I know this man personally. He loves this country, and I am glad to be your man in China. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think just for the sake of formality, here we go, David. Come on up. Come on up here, Bonnie. That's what it's all about, right? And now we send you on your way. Lots of luck.
Yes, sir.
We're right behind you, David.
Look forward to seeing you over there, sir.
Okay, have a good time.
God bless
Thank you.
you.
Congratulations, everybody. Congratulations. Any questions, please?
Mr. President, the Treasury Secretary just told lawmakers that a tariff exemption for certain baby items like car seats is under consideration. Will you exempt some products that families rely on?
I don't know. I'll think about it. I don't know. I really don't. I want to make it nice and simple. I'm not looking to have so many exemptions that nobody knows what's doing. We have to make it very simple, but I'll take a look at it. Yep.
Mr. President, there are rumblings in Washington that some House Republican moderates are opposed to defunding Planned Parenthood in this year's reconciliation package. What do you say to those members, and are you supportive of?
Well, I don't know yet. I have to see, because you're just telling me that for the first time. We'll work something out.
Mr. President, what are you hoping that your representatives will get out of the talks in Switzerland on China? And secondly, what does China need to do on fentanyl specifically? What do you want to see them do?
Well, they have to stop fentanyl from coming in. That'll be a very big part. And I had that understanding with President Xi before I left last time, and we had a deal, and he would have honored the deal. But when Biden came in, of course, nothing ever happened with him. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. But that would have saved a lot of lives. That election cost us a lot of lives and a lot of heartache. The fact that we went through 4 years of misery, and you look at what's coming through the border, and the job of getting murderers out of our country. So many bad things happened. The wars. You wouldn't have October 7th. You wouldn't have Russia fighting with Ukraine. You wouldn't have had that disaster in Afghanistan. You wouldn't have had inflation. All these things would have not taken place. So sad to see what happened. Any other questions?
Are your administration sending migrants to Libya?
I don't know. You'll have to ask Homeland Security, please.
Would you support sending
President Vance said Russia was asking for too much to end the war. Given that, do you still have confidence that...
When did he say that?
Earlier this morning.
Well, it's possible that he's right. He may know some things that, because I've been dealing with this and some other things, but we are getting to a point where some decisions are going to have to be made. I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about it. Okay.
Just to follow up, sir, on the talks in Switzerland, what do you expect? What do you hope to come out of
We'll
it?
see. I mean, look, it's we were losing $1 trillion a year. Now we're not losing anything. You know, that's the way I look at it. We were losing with China on trade $1 trillion a year, more actually, 1.1. But let's say $1 trillion. You know what we're losing now? Nothing. That's not bad.
Are you
President, are you planning a new ceasefire and hostage deal proposal for Israel and Hamas before you head over to the region next week?
Where? Where?
In Gaza.
In Gaza. Well, we're going to see what's happening. There's a lot of talk going on about Gaza right now. You know that, right? So you'll be knowing probably in the next 24 hours.
Are you taking diplomatic actions between the war in India and Pakistan? What's your position?
Oh, it's so terrible. My position is I get along with both. I know both very well, and I want to see them work it out. I want to see them stop. And hopefully they can stop now. They've gone tit for tat, so hopefully they can stop now. But I know both. We get along with both countries very well, good relationships with both, and I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there. By the way, unrelated, but I guess it's all related when you look at the world nowadays. Rwanda and the Congo, we've made a lot of progress in getting that disaster stopped. We've had a very talented person over there, and we've made a lot of progress with Rwanda and Congo fighting a very violent war, by the way.
China says in order to have substantive negotiations, you have to bring down your 145% tariffs. Are you open to pulling back your tariffs in order to get China to the negotiating table?
No.
Mr. President, Senator Tillis has come out against Ed Martin as U.S. Attorney. Do you have any response to that?
Well, it's disappointing because, you know, I know Eddie's very talented. Crime is down in Washington, D.C. Street crime, violent crime by 25%. And people have seen, they've noticed a big difference. So I didn't know that. But if anybody voted against him, I feel very badly about it, only in the sense that in this short period of time that he's been there, crime is down 25% in Washington, D.C. But that's really up to the senators. If they feel that way, they have to vote the way they vote. They have to follow their heart, and they have to follow their mind.
Mr. President, referring to the Persian Gulf as the Arabian Gulf, are you going to make that announcement on your trip?
They're going to ask me about that when I get there, and I'll have to make a decision.
So you haven't made a decision yet?
I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't know if feelings are going to be hurt. Why have a case right over here? It's called Gulf of America. And I guess a lot of people get ideas from us. But the Gulf of America was something I thought should have been named a long time ago. I'm going to be given a briefing on that. It was just done. And I'll make a decision.
Is it the U.S. position that Iran can have an enrichment program as long as it doesn't reach a weapons?
We haven't made that decision yet. We will, but we haven't made that decision yet.
China said the U.S. initiated the trade talks this weekend and that its position hasn't changed. Are you still confident you can reach a deal with China?
They said we initiated? Well, I think they ought to go back and study their files. Okay? I do think that. Go ahead. What would you?
Are you planning to ease chip export restrictions to some of these Gulf countries and then also make announcements regarding...
We might be doing that, yeah.
And their nuclear programs, civilian nuclear programs?
And it'll be announced soon.
And you're to help them develop some nuclear power?
Well, we're going to take a look. We're going to take a look. But, we had really a very good, as you know, we had a very good outcome with the Houthis, and we honor their word. I mean, they made a commitment, and we dealt with other countries that were close to them and their surrogates, and we honor all of their words. We'll see what happens, but I think, I believe that hopefully that's over with, and they'll leave the ships alone, just leave those ships alone. But so we do. We take their word for it. It was, we hit them very hard. They had a great capacity to withstand punishment. They took tremendous punishment. And, you know, you could say there's a lot of bravery there. That it was amazing what they took. But we honor their commitment and their word. They gave us their word that they wouldn't be shooting ships anymore, and we honor that. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to congratulate David Perdue and his family. He's going to be really an incredible ambassador to China. I have no doubt about it. And we're going to work together very closely. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you, David.
You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturtevant. Right there is President Trump and former Senator from Georgia, David Perdue, as he is sworn in as ambassador to China. Again, that swearing-in ceremony is just now wrapping up with some pictures now being taken of Perdue. It looks like his family, also President Trump there. So we want to shift over now to the Boston area where we've been tracking the Karen Read trial for weeks now, and we are now in week 3, entering day 11 to be exact of the trial. And right now on the stand is digital forensics examiner expert witness Jessica Hyde. Let's take a listen in.
In the same report, page 1528, which is your page number 6. And I just want you, please, to go to the, just put a placeholder in that. And if you could now just go to the conclusion, which is your page 50. Let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
So in the conclusion, you state that starting at 12:01 a.m. on January 29, 2022, the mobile phone was in use with activity of Waze navigating to 34 Fairview Drive, Canton, MA, active interaction with the screen, steps, audio playing text messages and calls until 12:31 a.m. EST on January 29, 2002. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
That statement is also incorrect, isn't it?
On what basis?
Do you believe that statement is correct or incorrect?
I believe that the statement is correct regarding those artifacts that are mentioned in that statement, yes.
Okay, if you could please, if you could turn to page 1535 of the same report.
Can you give me my page number, please?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If you could turn to your page 13.
13, Roger. Yes, I'm there.
And do you see an entry that says 12:31:56, which is the same time in the conclusion, but I'm going to develop it.
I believe I know where you're going.
Well, hold on. I'm sorry. I need to ask the questions. Yes. I appreciate you looking to help, but if I could, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So it's got health steps, and it has steps 36, duration 20.9398 seconds. Did I read that correctly?
That is absolutely correct.
So if you look at this data point in your report on page 13, the step began at 12:31:56, but they ended 20.39 seconds later at 12:32:16.
That is correct.
So therefore, your statement in your conclusion, if you could go back to your conclusion, your statement there is that the steps, the mobile phone is used with activity, including steps, until 12:31 a.m. EST. That should read until 12:32:16, correct?
It depends on your interpretation of interaction. As a user is walking, they're not actively interacting with their device. It's their movement that is. It's with the screen. But I would to your view that that was needing an additional 20 seconds.
Isn't the more correct way to state the conclusion that the active interaction when it comes to steps is not calibrating using the screen, but the phone is calculating steps taken? Isn't that correct?
That is correct, but that's not interactivity with the device.
I understand,
Yes.
but the sentence reads includes steps, and the more accurate way to have stated that would have been to put 12:32:16 instead of 12:31 a.m., correct?
I'm sorry, you just said 12:30. I did this to the minute, not to the second. Could you rephrase what you were citing?
Well, I'll state it again.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So isn't the more correct way to state this important data point in your conclusion, instead of saying active interaction with the screen and steps, etc., until 12:31 a.m. EST, the 12:31 should be 12:32, because the steps that you have on your page 13, by what you concede, is the duration of 20 would have brought it to 12:32:16, correct?
I would state that depends. I believe either is a correct way to state that. Based on interactivity, based on your interpretation, your definition is more correct.
Okay, thank you. And it's not my interpretation. I'm reading from your report, correct?
Your interpretation that 1232 is a more correct representation of interaction is based on your theory that interaction concludes when the steps end. And I'm saying both would be acceptable.
Okay, so let's follow up on this.
Sure.
Isn't it correct that it isn't my theory when the steps ended?
Oh, it's
if I could just finish,
Please,
because if we
sorry.
talk over each other, the stenographer's not going to get both of us. Thank
Agreed.
you. So it's not my theory, it's just the simple math from an entry you've made on page 13 that the steps began at 12:31:56. They ended 20.398 seconds after that, which, just doing the simple math, is 12:32:16. Did I do the math correctly?
That is correct.
Okay,
I'm not
thank you.
debating that.
Thank you very much. So now what I'd like to do is to go to page 1528 of your report.
Do you have my page number for that? I'm sorry.
Yes, and I appreciate that you go page number, so I just center in on the lower one, then I'll go immediately to the one. So it's your page 6, Ms. Hyde.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
If you could please go to Apple Health Data Steps.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about steps because they're important enough that you put them in a report, correct?
That is correct.
So let's go to an important data point, therefore, in your report, in the chart, which is the second entry, which is, as you've stated, 12:21:10 a.m. Do you see that?
I do.
And you note under the data that John O'Keefe's phone registered 80 steps at 12:21:10. Did I read that correctly?
You did read that correctly.
And those 80 steps constituted 191.253 seconds, as you state, correct?
That is what is stored in that database, correct?
And is my math correct, so that the jury understands this perhaps a little better?
Sure.
That 191.253 seconds equals 3.2 minutes?
Approximately, yes.
Approximately.
I'm doing the math in my head, so that's why I said approximately.
Right. Understood. So am I reading this entry correct, that you're stating what the data shows, that 80 steps were taken by the phone of whomever had the phone of Mr. O'Keefe? There were 80 steps taken at 12:21:10 a.m. on January 29, 2022, for a length of time of 3.2 minutes.
That is what the phone registered.
That's what the phone registered. Very well. Now what I'd like to do is to turn to the phone of Jennifer McCabe.
Okay.
And that is for your reports. You don't date your reports, so I can't give you a date, but it says...
It's report 3, I believe, is what...
Exactly.
Yep.
It's 3. And there is... Bear with me, I'm accommodating your page reference, and I'll have it soon for you. It is your page 7. And let me know when you are there.
I am there.
Are you aware of an issue regarding the time of an interactive phone activity on Jennifer McCabe's phone at 5:07 a.m.? Are you aware of that issue, and particularly a communication to a person named Coco? Are you aware of that?
I would need to check in my report. May I turn to the page for
Absolutely.
that time?
And
I do see an outgoing call to someone labeled Coco at 5:07:21 a.m.
And you can tell that because in your report on page 11, you list a 5:07:21 a.m. call to a Coco as outgoing, correct?
Correct.
Have you discussed that call with any member of the Commonwealth?
No.
And again, this call is at 5:07 a.m. on January 29th of 2022, correct?
That is correct.
There is no duration listed for that call. And if you just follow my questions, if you can, yes or no, is that correct? There's no duration yet listed.
Correct.
So what I want to do is to also note that that omission is not the only omission of durations from this report, or I'll state it differently, let me withdraw that. There is no population of the duration column for any call from 12:14:30 a.m. on January 29, 2022, all the way through this 5:07:21 call, and you don't start listing durations until 8:59:34 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes, and explainable. The artifact.
I understand
yes.
Mr.
Okay.
Brennan can
Sure.
handle those on his readback.
Absolutely.
So there's not a population of duration of calls after numerous early calls and phone, as you call it, interactive phone activity. Nothing populated in this report until 8:59:34. That's correct?
Yes.
All right. Now what I'd like to do is to turn to the 22740 artifact that was the subject of much discussion on Direct. And I am going to refer to that as an artifact. Is that a parlance that is familiar to you?
Yes.
And if I refer to that as a timestamp also, is that a parlance that's familiar to you?
Absolutely.
So I can refer to 22740 as a timestamp, and you would find that parlance acceptable?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to do that. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to refer to it as a timestamp. Now, you've been on this case working for the Commonwealth since May of 2023, correct?
May 4th, 2023. That is correct.
So you've been on this case for 2 years, correct?
Not actively the entire time.
But you started on this case in May 2023. You issued a report in May of 2023, correct?
Correct.
You issued a report in December of 2024, correct?
Correct, after being rehired in November.
Right. And you issued more reports in 2025, correct?
That is correct.
So all of that activity has been on this case, correct?
All on this case, that
And
is
that's
correct.
been all on behalf of the prosecution, correct?
That is correct.
None of that work has been done on behalf of the defense, correct?
That is correct.
So let us now go to the timestamp of 2/27/40. Your opinions on what is the meaning of that timestamp have varied from May of 2023 until today. Is that correct?
No, that is incorrect.
Let's cover that issue.
Sure.
Let's turn to your May 2023 report. Isn't it correct that the report and your findings were pursuant to a request from Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully?
Correct.
And how many interactions have you had with Lieutenant Detective Brian Tully on this case approximately?
I really don't know. I'd have to go look back at email and call logs.
Is it more than 5?
Yes.
Is it more than 10?
Yes.
Is it more than 20?
I don't know.
So somewhere between 10 and 20, would that be fair?
Again, I'd have to review my call logs. I'm not
But it
going to
was
test.
more than 10.
More than 10, I'm sure.
So the issue was your use of various forensic tools that revealed a timestamp, a 2/27:40 a.m. timestamp on January 29, 2022. Is that correct? Is that a fair characterization of an issue you looked at?
Correct.
So if you could go to page 5 of that report. And I would ask that you go to the last paragraph that starts with "in the instance of the Google search," and let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
So it reads, "In the instance of the Google search, house long to die in cold, that was recovered from the write-ahead log associated with the X-Browser State DB SQLite database with the timestamp of 2/27:40 a.m. was marked by Cellebrite as having this timestamp and being deleted." Did I read that correctly?
Fair. Yes.
So you use the words that Google search, "house long to die in cold," was associated with the timestamp of 2/27:40 a.m. Isn't that what your words are in this report?
In that database, they are associated. That is correct.
Right. And in terms of page 3, if you could go back, of your report, under relevant findings. It starts with, "There were 2 searches of interest that took place on the iOS device," and we're talking about Jennifer McCabe's device, correct?
The device that was identified to me as Jennifer McCabe's.
That's
Yes.
identified to you as Jennifer McCabe. And it's what you talked about on direct examination as her device,
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
It's not a mystery as to whose it is. It's not like you don't know, right?
In direct, I also use the phrase identified to me as Jennifer McCabe's.
Right, but your conclusion is the device you've been working on and analyzing for 2 years is the device of Jennifer McCabe.
That is how it was identified to me.
Do you have a different conclusion as to whose device it is?
I always am very, very careful that I did not assess the ownership. That was information that was given to me, not information that I personally assessed.
So are you uncertain as to whether the device you've been working on for 2 years is the phone
The
of Jennifer McCabe?
device that I've been working on for 2 years is the device that was identified to me by the Massachusetts State Police, Detective Tully, as belonging to Jennifer McCabe when I began working and received that device, as stated in the evidence analyzed section on this same page.
So let's go, and we're talking about, again, to get back to the center of gravity, we're talking about a timestamp of 2/27:40 a.m., correct?
That is correct.
And when you issued your first report in May of 2023, the timestamp you were looking at was 2/27 12:40 a.m. January 29, correct?
I was looking at multiple timestamps associated with the same two searches.
Right. So what I'd like to do, you said multiple timestamps. What times are in the multiple category?
What I was tasked to do was to look at the times, the search, the Google search history, I'm sorry, not Google search history, the Safari history, which includes Google searches, associated with those two search terms within that 12-hour period. That was the particular task, not the task of looking at the 227, just for clarity.
Right. And I appreciate that, but my question wasn't that. My question was, I thought I heard you on direct examination, which is why I repeated the question, what I thought I heard on direct, but I'll ask you the question.
Sure.
You looked at and talked about on direct two potential times for a Safari search, which includes Google, one of which was 2:27:40 and the other one was 6:23 a.m. Is that correct?
I analyzed the meaning of those two timestamps.
Right. So we're just talking about two times, 2:27:40 and then 6:23. Is that correct?
So you are only talking then about the one that we're also talking about 6:24 a.m.
Okay. So we
Eastern time for clarity, because some of these records are in UTC, some are in local.
Fair enough. So you've got 2:27:40, you've got 6:23, and you got 6:24 that you were looking at, correct?
There are other timestamps that exist in the realm of what I was looking at, but those ones, correct, are the ones that are relevant in this report.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about.
Okay,
We're just talking about this report.
Yes.
And so if you look under relevant findings, at the very bottom paragraph, you say, second sentence, a Google search for how long to die in cold at approximately 11:23 a.m. and then how long TIDIE in cold took place at 11:24.
That is in UTC. I apologize for not having the timestamp format there, but that is the UTC time. The UTC time equivalent in Eastern Local Time would be 6:23 and 6:24.
So to be clear, in your report, you wrote 11:23 a.m. and 11:24, and you didn't put UTC next to it,
Correct.
did
They
you?
should. You are correct. That should say UTC. That is a typo.
And there's a significant difference between 11:23 and 2:27:40, correct?
11:23 is UTC, so its equivalent in Eastern Time would be 6:23. The artifact of 2:27 is already in local time, so that is in Eastern Time. So what we would be comparing is 2:27 and 6:23 and 6:24 to be appropriate. They're taking into account the data storage and which ones are in UTC and which ones are in local time.
I understand your explanation now.
Perfect.
But in this report, there is no UTC time down. You have two additional times in addition to the two times, two different numbers added to the two, correct?
The UTC was a typo. It should say UTC next to those, and the chart shows all of those artifacts in EST and is clearly labeled that they're all in EST.
So you would agree that it's better stated to state it a different way than you have in your report?
I would say that both are equivalent. I should have had UTC there. But yes, it's easier for the audience to speak in EST. I would say forensics examiners typically communicate in UTC, but we translate for our reports. And I should have either communicated that in EST or included UTC. I will definitely contend that.
So in terms of your May 2023 report, your first report in this matter.
Yes.
You, on page 5, in the sentence underneath the block paragraph, state, in the instance of the Google search, House long to die in cold that was recovered from the write-ahead log associated with.
That's correct.
The X browser stage with a timestamp of 2027:40 a.m. was marked by Celebrite as having this timestamp and being deleted. Did I read that correctly?
You read that correctly.
Now let's move ahead to page 7 of your report. Up at the top above conclusion. Importantly, at this time, you state, testing shows great inconsistency with timestamps parsed from this file. It is, however, definitive that the page existed in a tab.
Correct.
While a definitive reason as to why the timestamp is listing the time of 2:27:40 is unknown, the time is inconsistent with the timestamps associated with the same search. Did I read that correctly?
You did read it correctly.
So as of May 2023, you said the definitive reason as to why the timestamp is listed as 2:27:40 is unknown, correct? I'm just asking, is that what you wrote? Unknown.
I believe that the wording here is, sorry, I do use the word unknown. It says, while a definitive reason as to why the timestamp listing is the time of 02/27:40 is unknown. Sorry.
So you use the word unknown, your word in your report?
Yes.
Okay, so now what I'd like to do is to go on to the first proceeding in this matter. Do you remember giving testimony in a proceeding about a year ago under oath?
Yes, I do.
I am now going to go to that testimony, and if at any point you would like to have a copy of that, if Your Honor would like, I will do it, but I'm going to start and then we'll see how it goes. So, bear with me a moment. Do you recall in that testimony stating that you processed the image in several forensic tools? I used Cellebrite Physical Analyzer, and then you list many other tools. Do you remember giving that testimony?
We have a page.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, I thought I'd given it 1-12. My apologies if I didn't. It's June 14, 2024, page 1-12.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, do you recall giving testimony about the various tools you use for this timestamp?
I do.
And do you recall stating that those tools were commonly used digital forensic tools that are very standard? Do you recall that?
I'd have to see the wording that I used at that exact time.
Would it be helpful to refresh your recollection if I showed you that?
It would be great. I would greatly appreciate that because I do not recall the precise wording, but I know that I spoke to the tools I used.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, Mr. Alessi, you offered a transcript. Do you have the whole
I
transcript?
have the whole transcript if that helps.
It might speed things along.
Agreed.
Okay.
We have one. I'll provide it. Ms. Hyde, I'm going to give you a transcript.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Brennan? Transcript. 112. Thank you. You are. That's, let me turn it over to you. It's going to be 112. Okay. Go to it. Got it? Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And you said we're on 112?
Yes, please.
113, I see it. I see it's highlighted on the copy, so I
Right,
figured
so
that's the
what I
one.
wanted to do, the reason I said 112 is that's where I started with my
sorry.
previous question. So I'm not going to repeat the question, but just to orient you, so you have a fair context for the questioning.
Fair.
So I started at the bottom, 112, now I'm moving to 113, and I'm starting with line 7. Do you see that?
I do.
And it says, yes, they are commonly used digital forensic tools that are very standard for other forensic examiners to use on mobile exploitation. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct.
And then if you go down to line 22, you testified in that proceeding. So it's important to use multiple tools so you can see the results from different data sets, and be able to compare those results and enhance those with manual analysis. Did I read that correctly?
You did, that's correct.
And then going up to page 114, line 5.
Slow down a little bit, Mr. Alessi.
I will, Your Honor, thank you. Yeah, that's very, very typical for me to process with multiple tools to ensure that I'm getting the most complete interpretation from forensic tools. Of course, you go beyond that with your analysis, but it's absolutely pertinent to that. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct.
And then lastly, for this section at page 114, 17, the Sanderson tool is meant to look at specific type of data structures called the SQLite database. XQLite databases are very nuanced, and this particular tool allows you to take that database and explore it at a deeper level than the other forensic tools allow. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Now if we can go to page 124 of the very same testimony. And feel free to go back a page just so you can see to page 123 that the topic is the 2/27/40 timestamp associated with how long to die in cold.
Can I have a moment just to review and get context?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Page 123:13, but if you need to go back further, feel free.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what I want to do is start with page 1-23, and this is your testimony. On line 16, I have them in the timestamp order that is associated with the artifact. You use that word associated again, correct? Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And that's associated with the Google search, how long to die in cold, in a 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp, correct?
That is correct.
Now if you turn the page of the testimony, you state back then that on page 124, line 1, the browser state DB is an artifact that speaks to when tabs are moved. So when you're using your browser and you open different tabs, you may have a search that this time pertains to the time that the tab moved. It could be lots of things. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Not one thing, you said it could be lots of things, correct?
That is correct.
And then you go on in line 10, and you talk more, and then you go down to the bottom. You go down to line 20, and you testified, we cannot tell by this particular artifact what time that search occurred. Did
Absolutely.
I read that correctly?
It's specifically pertaining to that particular artifact that in browser state DB that does not tell us what time a search occurred. That is correct.
Right. So you stated, and it was your statement then, we cannot tell by this particular artifact what time that search occurred, correct?
That particular artifact.
Okay, so now let's keep going. If you go to page 129 of this transcript,
I'm there.
at the top,
Sure.
line 1, 227 isn't necessarily one time when the tab was closed. That's in my report. I say it's undetermined. Remember we were just reading your undetermined
Absolutely.
in your May 23 report?
Correct.
Because there's a lot of things that can cause that time stamp to be there, including tab being moved, tab being minimized. The next sentence. I don't know exactly what caused the tab to get that particular entry, but it's not, that timestamp is not indicative of the time of the search or any URL that's visited. But the first part of it is, I don't know exactly what caused the tab to get that particular entry. Did I read that correctly?
You read 100% correctly.
Thank you. Now if we could turn to page 130 of your testimony.
I need to object.
I'll see you both.
You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturtevant. It looks like they are in recess, or having a sidebar, I should say, in the Karen Reed trial. Right now, we want to take you now to a House hearing for FEMA's director. He's testifying during this hearing. Let's take a listen in.
If you don't mind, I'll put them all together and you can take with it what you could. Could you speak to the tangible actions and technologies that you're evaluating to deliver on this first? And also, how might FEMA use advanced technologies to better coordinate with other federal agencies to ensure that taxpayer funds are able to recover faster and are used more efficiently so communities are better served? Do you have a clear idea on the level of funding or resources? Because given that what we've seen in the skinny budget, there's only noted reductions in certain areas of grant programming. And is the agency currently working to update the strategic plan?
So all great questions. I would say that to start on your first point, the tech solutions that we're looking to innovate, one of the first things that I saw by coming at FEMA, given my past emergency management background, but also my background in response and recovery operations, was that we didn't have an information portal that was fast, embedding programmatic information, but also giving us a snapshot for a whole portfolio. It's very challenging to show a cost-benefit analysis. It's very challenging to have aggregated data that can give you informed decision-making with metrics, statistics, and real-time information so that you can see clear trending lines early. Our goal, again, my role here as the administrator of FEMA, even in an acting capacity, is to be the principal advisor to the President and the Secretary on disasters and emergency management. They need as much decision-making space as possible so that they can make informed decisions and give us initiatives and agendas to execute when it comes to mission success. So the better we innovate our technology, the more improvement we'll have in that space as well. One of the key proposals we had was a disaster information portal. The idea of when you order a pizza from Domino's, you know when it was ordered, when it goes in the oven, when it comes out of the oven, when it's ready for pickup and sliced and in a box. Yet we don't have that same level of approach towards guiding and mentoring applicants through the process of applying for public assistance or individual assistance. That's complex. That's unacceptable. We have individual survivors who wait weeks to get responses, sometimes months before they get payouts, who are in significant financial dire straits. You have municipalities that extend significant leverage, like you mentioned before, Mr. Rutherford, carrying these balances. We're overhauling the manner in which we engage with our state, local, tribal, territorial partners, as well as individual survivors to be faster and more compelling. That's one of the specific solutions to create a system of systems, truly an information environment. I've helped orchestrate and build some of those before at DHS. This will be much more larger and more comprehensive, and we're very excited about the solutions that it would entail. And with that comes coordination with partners, looking at 3 principal user bases where we allow our external partners to include members of Congress to have cleared staff who can have access to survivor information if self-selected, so that you can track on cases. If you have a constituent that calls you and they say, hey, I'm not getting a response from FEMA, we want to create a system where your staff can log in, see it clearly. FEMA's giving you chats, features. You're not waiting on a phone call for 3 or 4 days. You're getting real-time feedback that's dynamic, and we mentor them through those application processes to get them to success. And to be very clear and transparent among, if they don't qualify, we want them to know why.
Absolutely.
We want there to be transparency there. So those are some of the several solutions that we're hoping to implement that I think will really overhaul and change how we interact with both localities and jurisdictions as well as individual survivors, sir.
Awesome. I appreciate that response, and look forward to working with you on that. And to prevent further reprimands, I'm going to yield my time back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Touche to my college from
Washington State. Yeah, that'll be the next one. I'm not from there. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from the high-altitude portion of Texas. Ms. Escobar, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hamilton, thank you for your service, and thanks for being here.
It was my honor.
I share the concerns that our ranking member laid out. I have never seen FEMA as an organization that the American people are dependent on or that states are dependent on. I've seen FEMA as a partner to states and to localities, and I'm really concerned about what I have heard from Secretary Noem and from the President about eliminating FEMA. I certainly hope that doesn't happen. I am all in on common sense reforms, and frankly, I think there's plenty of room in FEMA for some common sense reforms. I'm not a champion of the status quo at FEMA, and so I look forward to working together on those reforms. But I think the context for my concern about FEMA and some of these obligations being pushed down to the state is because even in Texas, I have seen deficiencies that have impacted my community. I also think the greater context is cuts that are coming to state and local governments at the federal level. I've heard from my local governments, tribal communities, very concerned about potential cuts to Medicaid, nutrition programs. So layering this added responsibility onto localities at such a challenging time for local governments and state governments, that's another area of concern for me. But I will tell you, I have some very specific local questions that I hope to be able to work with you on these issues. The first question is around the UOSC funding. And El Paso was relegated to an unfunded status some time ago and had previously enjoyed being able to receive UOSC funding. My local government, the local municipality, the city of El Paso, has tried working with FEMA to try to access funds, and they've been unsuccessful, and we'd really love your help in thinking through what needs to happen so that the city of El Paso can once again have access to those funds. We have major land ports of entry. We have a major military installation. There's a number of reasons why why that UOSC funding could and should be helpful to the community. So I'm wondering if you can commit to working with us on gaining access once again.
I can't promise an outcome, but I absolutely commit myself, my staff, to working with you and to better understanding your challenges.
Great.
And to help find solutions that make sense and to ensure that you're informed on exactly how rationales are determined. Because if states and cities and jurisdictions are eligible and qualified, we certainly want to ensure that they get the resources necessary.
Great, that would be super helpful. We've seen other communities who were relegated to this status gain access, so we'd like to be one of those success stories. The other pot of funding I'd like to talk to you is the SAFER grants. We have emergency services districts, which are the special districts, firefighters, volunteer firefighters, they're taxing entities as well, but would love your thoughts on how we can help our emergency services districts access some of those SAFER grants.
So I'm a big advocate for the SAFER grants. We have a decision memo that we are hoping to be able to fund many of those programs. Again, that's pending the department approval. And I will tell you, I was formerly the director of emergency medical services at DHS headquarters. I'm also a first responder, former combat medic and paramedic currently. So the care and funding for our first responders is crucial. It's very near and dear to me because I've spent 2 decades as a first responder in some capacity.
You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturtevant. Right now, live happening is Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He's speaking after the Federal Reserve announced today that it was leaving interest rates unchanged as it warns that the chance of both higher unemployment and higher inflation has climbed in the wake of President Donald Trump's tariffs plan. Let's take a listen in to what Fed Chair Jerome Powell is saying right now.
Chair Powell, there's naturally a lot of PTSD around 2021 with supply shocks. But there are some who argue that the current situation has notable differences. Energy costs are down. Housing imbalances look nothing like they did 4 years ago. Labor demand appears to be gradually cooling with wage growth running below 4%. What do you see right now that could nourish higher inflation beyond a rise in goods prices this year?
I think the underlying inflation picture is good. It's what you see, which is inflation now running a bit above 2%. And we've had basically decent readings in housing services and non-housing services, which is a big part of it. So that part, I think, is moving along well. But there's just so much that we don't know. I think and we're in a good position to wait and see is the thing. We don't have to be in a hurry. The economy has been resilient and is doing fairly well. Our policy is well positioned. The costs of waiting to see further are fairly low, we think. So that's what we're doing. And we'll see. The administration is entering into negotiations with many countries over tariffs. We'll know more with each week and month that goes by where tariffs are going to land, and we'll know what the effects will be when we start to see those things. So we think we'll be learning. I can't tell you how long it will take, but for now it does seem like it's a fairly clear decision for us to wait and see and watch.
So when you say that you don't need to be in a hurry, does that mean that could the outlook change in such a way that a change in your stance could be warranted as soon as your next meeting?
As I said, we are comfortable with our policy stance. We think we're in the right place to wait and see how things evolve. We don't feel like we need to be in a hurry. We feel like it's appropriate to be patient. And when things develop, of course, we have a record of we can move quickly when that's appropriate. But we think right now the appropriate thing to do is to wait and see how things evolve. There's so much uncertainty. If you talk to businesses or market participants or forecasters, everyone is just waiting to see how developments play out, and then we'll be able to make a better assessment of what the appropriate path for monetary policy is. So we're not in that place, and as that develops, and I can't really give you a time frame on that.
Janelle Marte with Bloomberg. So many economists have been pricing in higher odds of a recession, and several are noting that it is more difficult for the Fed to cut rates preemptively given the higher risks for higher inflation. So given the outlook, do you still see a path for a soft landing, and what does that look like?
Well, let me say, so let's look back and see where we are. So to go through 2024 up to the day, we've had unemployment in the low 4s for more than a year. We've had inflation coming down now in the mid to low 2s. We've had an economy growing at 2.5%. So that is the economy as we see it now. What looks likely, given the scope and scale of the tariffs, is that we will see certainly the risks to higher inflation, higher unemployment have increased. And if that's what we do see, if the tariffs are ultimately put in place at those levels, which we don't know, then we won't see further progress toward our goals. But we might see a delay in that. I think in our thinking we never do anything but keep achieving those goals. But we would, at least for the next, let's say, year, we would not be making progress toward those goals. Again, if that's the way the tariffs shake out. The thing is, we don't know that. There's so much uncertainty about the scale, scope, timing, and persistence of the tariffs. So that's that. In terms of preemption, I think You can look back at the 2019 cuts as preemptive. I wouldn't say that what we did last fall was at all preemptive. If anything, it was a little late. But 2019, we did cut 3 times, but the situation was you had a weakening economy and you had inflation at 1.6%. So that's a situation where you can move preemptively. Now we have inflation running above target. It has been above target for 4 years. It's not so far above target now, and we have an expectation, conditional on what happens, that we'll see upward pressure on inflation. If you look at where forecasters are, they're all forecasting an increase in inflation. So it makes it, and then we've also got forecasts of weakening in the economy, and some have recession forecasts. We don't publish a forecast about that. We don't publish a forecast that assesses how likely a recession is. But in any case, it's not a situation where we can be preemptive because we actually don't know what the right response to the data will be until we see more data.
Colby Smith with the New York Times. How much weakness does the committee need to see, though, in the labor market and the economy more broadly to lower interest rates again? Is it about a certain increase in the unemployment rate over a period of time, or perhaps a certain number of negative monthly job reports? I mean, how are you making that assessment?
So first of all, we don't see that yet, right? We have 4.2% unemployment, good participation, wages behaving very well. Participation, I mentioned, at a good level. So, with the labor market, we would look at the totality of the data. We'd look at the level of the unemployment rate. We'd look at the speed with which it's changing. We would look at the whole huge array of labor market data to get a sense of whether conditions are really deteriorating or not. And at the same time, we'd be looking at the other side of the mandate. We could be in a position of having to balance those two things, which is, of course, a difficult balancing judgment that we'd have to make.
On that point about balancing, I mean, you've mentioned that the committee would consider how far the economy is from each goal and the time it would take to kind of get back to that point. But what does that mean in practice? I mean, how much of that assessment will be rooted in a forecast versus data dependence?
It would be a combination of the two. I mean, let's just say this would be a complicated and challenging judgment that we would have to make. Yeah, we're not in this situation, but the situation is if the two goals are in tension, so let's say that unemployment is moving up in an uncomfortable way, and so is inflation. Not the situation we're in, hypothetically, but we would look at how far they are from the goals, how far they're expected to be from the goals, what's the expected time to get back to their goals. We'd look at all those things and make a difficult judgment, and that's in our framework. It's always been in our thinking. We haven't faced that question in a very long time. So, again, difficult judgment to make, and not one that we face today, and we may never face it, but we have to be keeping it in our thinking now.
Thank you. Edward Lawrence with Fox Business. So we had the CPI report that came out that showed month over month the first decrease in inflation in about 3 years. The jobs report, you said, solid, that we saw. At the same time, we have those new tariffs that we're living under. So given this, should the Federal Reserve be cutting rates at all this year?
It's going to depend. I think you have to just take a step back and realize this is why we are where we are, is we're going to need to see how this evolves. There are cases in which it would be appropriate for us to cut rates this year. There are cases in which it wouldn't. And we just don't know. Until we know more about how this is going to settle out and what the economic implications are for employment, for inflation, I couldn't confidently say that I know what the appropriate path will be.
So following on that, so then how does President Trump calling on you personally, as well as the Federal Reserve, to make rate cuts affect your decision today and affect your job difficulty?
Doesn't affect our doing our job at all. So we're always going to do the same thing, which is we're going to use our tools to foster maximum employment and price stability for the benefit of the American people. We're always going to consider only the economic data, the outlook, the balance of risks, and that's it. That's all we're going to consider. So it really doesn't affect either our job or the way we do it.
Howard.
Hi, Howard Schneider with Reuters, and thanks for the time. I'm wondering, I mean, given the complexity about the first quarter GDP and what lies ahead, I'm just wondering what your intuition tells you about the underlying direction of the economy right now. Many of your colleagues have said they feel growth is slowing. If so, do you have any sense of by how much, to what degree the slowdown may be? What does your gut tell you about how things are evolving out there?
My gut tells me that uncertainty about the path of the economy is extremely elevated, and that the downside risks have increased. The risk is, as we pointed out in our statement, the risks of higher unemployment and higher inflation have risen, but they haven't materialized yet. They're really not in the data yet. So that tells me more than by intuition, because I think it's obvious actually that the right thing for us to do is we're in a good place. Our policy's in a very good place, and the right thing to do is await further clarity. And there's usually things clarify, and the appropriate direction becomes clear. That's what usually happens. Right now, it's very hard to say what that would be. In the meantime, the economy is doing fine. Our policy isn't, it's not highly restrictive. It's somewhat restrictive. It's 100 basis points less restrictive than it was in, last summer. So we think it's in a good place, and we think the appropriate thing is for us to wait and see and get more clarity about the direction of the economy.
Well, let me press you on this idea of the economy being fine right now, because reading the Beige Book very closely the last time around, there was a lot of negative stuff, negative sentiment that was in there. And I know that everybody's looking at soft data right now. You mentioned it yourself that the sentiment's sour. But the Beige Book was talking about, the beginnings of layoffs in some industries, prices rising in some places, and an awful lot of investment decisions being pushed to the sideline. Doesn't that point to a slowdown?
It may well. It just hasn't shown up yet. And we all look at all these sentiment and read many individual comments just to get a better feel. And businesses and households very broadly are concerned and postponing economic decisions of various kinds. And yes, if that continues and nothing happens to sort of alleviate those concerns, then you would expect that to begin to show up in economic data. It wouldn't maybe show up overnight, but it would show up over weeks and months. And that may be what happens, but it hadn't happened yet. And also, there are things that can happen that will change that narrative. I mean, they haven't happened, but it's possible to imagine things that. But in the meantime, yes, we're watching it extremely carefully, like everyone is, but don't see really much evidence of it in actual economic data yet. And by the way, consumers keep spending, credit card spending. It's still a healthy economy, albeit one that is shrouded in some very downbeat sentiment on the part of people and businesses.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television. The Fed's been criticized recently by a former governor for what he calls mission creep. You take on more problems, use more tools, and then end up building tools to deal with the fallout of those tools, which then makes it a given that you will act more aggressively in the future. Is that a fair critique, and is that something you would be looking at in your framework review?
Sorry, say the critique again.
That the Fed has been involved in mission creep, gets involved in using too many new tools to deal with problems and to go too far. Is that something that the critique was based around the fact that you did QE and QE and QE and went beyond the narrow confines of your mandate?
So, well, I mean, there are a couple. That's not really beyond the confines of our mandate. Look, I would say this: we did things. Essentially, we're on an emergency footing for a couple of years in the pandemic, and it's very fair and very welcome for people to look back over what we did and say, hey, you could have done this better and different. And one thing we hear a lot is we could have explained QE a little better. We did think we were explaining it in real time. I completely accept the thought that we could have explained it better. There's a lot of thinking that we went on too long with QE. I can tell you that the reason we did was we were concerned that we didn't want a a tightening of, a sharp tightening in financial conditions at a time when we thought the economy was still vulnerable. And so we did hold on for a long time to QE, and we, of course, tapered and everything. And then we immediately went into QT, and, you know, we're down a couple of trillion. But I get the you know, we certainly, with the benefit of hindsight, could have tapered earlier or faster. That's absolutely right. But this is all very welcome. You know, it's you know, we knew doing this in real time that we weren't going to get it perfect, and those kind of you know, after action kind of looks are essential, and we're doing the same thing in our review. So on some issues.
The other part of that critique is that you've taken on topics that are outside of the mandate, such as climate change and trying to ensure that certain groups are benefited by your economic policies in terms of employment, et cetera.
So, okay, on climate, you've heard me say over and over again that we will not be climate policymakers, and that our role on climate is a very, very narrow one. And I think that's what we've done. We've done really very little on climate. You can say that little bit that we've done was too much, but I wouldn't want to give any impression that you know, we've taken climate and it's something that we're spending a lot of time and energy on. We're not. We have very, very narrow things. We did one guidance for the banks, and then we did a one-time stress analysis, climate stress analysis, and that's it. And, you know, we dropped out of the network for greening the financial system. So we didn't do much on climate, but I do think, and I've said this publicly several times, I think it's a real danger for us to try to take on a mandate like that, which is very narrow application to our work. And, you know, the risk is if you go for things that are really not in your mandate, you know, then why are you independent? And I think that's a very fair question. I do think we've done a whole lot less on climate than some people seem to think we did. Anyway, that's what I think.
Should you have taken on the question of bringing unemployment rates down for specific categories?
We didn't do that. You know, what we said was that we never targeted any unemployment rate for individual racial or demographic groups. What we said was that maximum employment was a broad and inclusive goal. And I think what we meant by that was we're going to consider the totality of the country as we look at our maximum employment goal. Of course, we were never going to target any individual group with that, but I think some people, you know, wanted to hear it that way, but that's not at all what we meant. So that's just not a correct reading of our, but I can see how, you know, maybe people found that confusing, and you know, we have to take that into consideration.
Jolene.
Hi, Chair Powell. Thanks for taking our questions today. I'm Jolene Kent with CBS News. You've said wait and see, and the economy is doing fine today, but the impact of tariffs are already showing up at the ports. Businesses, big and small, are telling us that they feel it, and most importantly, consumers say they feel it, that the challenges are here, and there's no waiting and seeing. For Main Street, what is the breaking point? What would have to happen to prompt a rate cut specifically?
Well, you know, so we really don't see in the data yet big economic effects. We see sentiment, there are concerns that higher prices may be coming or things like that. So they're worried now about inflation. They're worried about the, you know, a shock from the tariffs, but they really haven't. That shock hasn't hit yet. Okay, so, you know, we're going to be looking at the not just the sentiment data, but also the real economic data as we assess what it is we should do. And remember, there will be two effects. One of them would be weakening economic activity, which translates into higher unemployment, and the other would be potentially higher inflation. Again, to say it again, the timing, the scope, the scale, and the persistence of those effects are very, very uncertain. So it's not at all clear what the appropriate response for monetary policy is at this time. And and by the way, our policy is in a good place, so we think we can wait and move when it is clear what the right thing to do is. Really not at all clear what it is we should do. So people are feeling stress and concern, but unemployment hasn't gone up. Job creation is fine. Wages are in good shape. You people are not layoffs, or people are not getting laid off at high levels. Initial claims for unemployment are not increasing, in any kind of impressive way. So the economy itself is still, in solid shape.
Just a quick follow-up. President Trump now says he does not plan to remove you as chair. When you heard that, what did you think?
I don't have anything more for you on that. I've pretty much covered that issue. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Chris Rugaber, Associated Press. Well, I just wanted to follow up. Earlier, it sounded like you said it was unclear how the Fed, what kind of interest rate decisions you will make later this year. So does that, in March, there was guidance that 2 cuts might happen, 2 cuts were penciled in for this year. Is that now, that guidance from the last press conference, has that been overtaken by events at this point?
We don't do a summary of economic projections at every meeting, as you know. We do it every other meeting, and so this was the meeting when we didn't do it. And we don't also kind of poll people, so I really wouldn't want to try to make a specific projection for where we are relative to that. We will, in 6 weeks, we had the June meeting, and you'll have another SEP. I'm not going to hazard a guess here today as to what it would be. Again, what I would say is that we think our policy rate is in a good place. We think it leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential developments. That's where we are. And that, depending on the way things play out, that could include rate cuts. It could include us holding where we are. We just are going to need to see, how things play out before we make those decisions.
Great, and just to follow up on that, I mean, when you address the issue of how the Fed would handle both rising unemployment and rising inflation, how are you thinking about the fact that addressing one could exacerbate the other? So a rate cut to reduce unemployment could worsen inflation and vice versa. How do you handle those challenges?
You just captured this is the issue with the 2 goals being in tension. It's a very challenging question. Now, there can be a case in which one goal is very far, one variable is very, very far from its goal, much farther than the other, and if so, you concentrate on that one. And frankly, that was the case. Well, it wasn't a case where they were really in tension, but if you go back to 2022, it was very clear that we needed to focus.
All right, breaking news. This is Colin Mayfield inside the Impact News studio. We have black smoke here in the Vatican City right now, which means this vote did not procure us a new Pope. So obviously another vote will happen, but that will happen tomorrow. 2 votes will take place tomorrow, but this seems to be the close of this day. As you can see from the shot that we have there in Italy, it is pretty dark. This shot looks a little bit better, irised up, but no one voted or no one selected as the new Pope to head the Roman Catholic Church. So quite a day. The first smoke signal was the same as we expected early this Wednesday. So a lot more work to be done. So this conclave, of course, still working to elect a new Pope, conducted by the College of Cardinals, which we do know that 130 plus cardinals are there in Vatican City taking part in this conclave, which they have been vowed to secrecy. And of course, now there will be other meetings held probably behind the scenes, at coffee, at lunches, those type of things to try to shore up to see where certain votes lie and who the candidates might be. So we have not heard much, obviously, since these individuals have gone into the conclave today. But before voting, the Cardinals, of course, discussing the needs and the challenges facing the Catholic Church, especially after Pope Francis, and really how revolutionary he was for the entire Catholic Church. Of course, they have gathered earlier at St. Peter's Basilica over the last couple of weeks and days ahead of this conclave that we now are seeing first day kind of rounding out. There are tons of people in Vatican City. As you can see, what a shot. This is just stunning. So we're going to try and continue to stick with this. Not much else going on at this moment. I know we are awaiting for an interview here back home, live here in Charlotte. We're going to speak to an expert. Today is the Real ID deadline day, where everyone needs to have a Real ID in terms of being able to fly or entering federal buildings. If not having a federal ID, you would need another ID, such as a passport, to try and get to those places and to get into those buildings. I did pull up some surprising facts about the conclave. Let me know if Betsy's on the line for us, Jeb, unless you still want to go. We are good. Okay, awesome. We'll come back to this and talk a little bit more about the Pope and who the next Pope could be, and obviously where we are in this entire process. But I do want to welcome in Miss Betsy, if you would. Betsy Jones. Betsy, I appreciate you sharing some time with us. You're a cyber expert. It's great to have you on. Today is Real ID deadline day across America. We've been talking about that extensively here in Charlotte and what that means, obviously, for our viewers. I thought it was interesting because you were commented on some of the scams that I guess folks are trying to take advantage of people with this Real ID. So center us here, what that would look like and what people should be looking out for.
Yep. So first, thanks so much for having me on the show today. And this is just really a passion of mine, is to make sure that the public really does realize when, and how to spot a scam.
Betsy, can you hear us?
Oh, I can hear you. Can you not hear me?
Got you. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Thanks. So thanks so much for having me on the show. And this is just a real passion of mine, just to make sure that the public has got a really good awareness of potentially how they could get scammed, especially when you've got a big deadline like this coming up. So first thing that I think folks should understand is your DMV or your state is probably not going to text you. So if you're getting a text that says, hey, urgently need you to send money here, do you have your ID, etc., urgent deadline, it's probably not real. Next thing you want to look at is, if you are going to make appointments with your DMV, make sure when you're going to the website that it truly is the government website. Sometimes the scammers can pay to have their link put up at the very top of the scroll bar, and most people don't understand that. So make sure that whatever link you're clicking on has the .gov or the official government website URL to it. And then you always want to look for misspellings and grammar errors. The federal, not only the federal government, but the state government goes through many layers of reading and review before they publish articles and different advertisements. Very rarely are you ever going to see something hugely grammatically wrong or a big misspelling in something that they're putting out. So those are the big three that you should definitely be watching out for. Your texts, making sure you're going to the right website, and looking for misspelling and grammar errors in whatever they're advertising.
To conclude at 3:12 Eastern. This is the
Awesome.
News Channel.
That's a great point. What if, everything through text messages, I'm getting hit up from certain spots, right, about paying a certain fee related to a toll. So it's interesting that these text messages are coming across to people's phones nowadays, and it is interesting to learn more about how folks should protect themselves in that way. Let's say I did click in on one of those messages, right? Shouldn't have done that, but I end up finding some funky stuff. Either, they're able to get malware on the phone, or what should I do at that point? Is it too late? Should I call the bank? What are some things that maybe we should do at that point?
Yeah, so it's not just about clicking. Just because you clicked on it, the next thing is don't pay it. So when you start to look at, where they're asking you to send a payment, no one's going to ask you to do a wire transfer. A DMV is never going to ask you to do a wire transfer. Your toll company is never going to ask you, your state is never going to ask you to send a wire transfer. So that's the next piece. So just because you click on it doesn't necessarily mean it's always a bad thing. It's when you start sending over money in ways where you're doing a third-party Cash App, like you're using a Zelle or something like that, or again, like a wire transfer. You don't want to do that. No legitimate company is going to ask for a payment that way. So that's first and foremost. The other thing that a lot of folks can do that most don't realize is you can actually freeze your credit report. So if you're afraid of getting scammed, there's also ways to protect yourself on the back end. So even if you did click on something and they got your information, they still would have to try and use your information to get a credit card or open up a bank account. Well, they can't do that if your credit report is frozen. So keeping your credit report frozen until such time that you need credit is another really good way of protecting yourself just in case.
Fantastic. Other things that are coming to my mind would be doing things in person, right? I mean, you pretty much have to go to the DMV nowadays to get these things done, especially Real ID. You need multiple pieces of paperwork as well. Let's say you forget something and you get a text message. Does it get as specific as, hey, you forgot this certain ID? Or, because I know how messages are sent through email and how specific they can be. Anything like that can come through?
Typically not. So when you go to the window, so think about your experience at a DMV, you bring all of your paperwork, you show up to the window, the person at the window is going to tell you, hey, you forgot your birth certificate, or I need a copy of your past passport. They're not typically going into a computer and making notes about you. So there would be no way or a tracking mechanism of what you forgot, because it's being handled right there at the window. So again, it's another great point that if you're getting some type of an email message that says, oh, I need your passport number, probably not legitimate, probably don't want to send your information via that way.
Perfect. Anything that I'm missing with this entire puzzle? Because I know that it can be overwhelming for folks, especially with the deadline today. So, sometimes as humans, we rush into things because we know we're late to do it. I've procrastinated before. It's happened to me. So anything that we should look out for that may be a caveat that we didn't speak of just yet?
Yeah, people ask, how do I know if I even have a Real ID? There's a star on it. So if you pull out your license and there's now a star in the upper right hand side of your ID, you're good to go. But that is really the trademark or the watermark that all of the states are using to show that this is a Real ID compliant license that you can use at the airport, federal facilities. And, I actually work in the energy sector. We actually have to show it when we go on property at different energy companies. So that's how you know if you're compliant or not.
Love that. Super simple and easy. Betsy, thank you so much for sharing some time with us. Sorry to put you off because of the vote that was just cast on Vatican City, but it was great to have you, and appreciate you trying to keep us safe. We'll make sure to play this interview as well, more than just tonight. So Betsy Jones, cyber expert. Hopefully she'll be back with us here on WCNC Plus. Let's go back to the shot that if we do have of Vatican City, it seems like a lot of people have cleared out. I'm looking at router 2. If we can pull that up there, Jeb. Absolutely, he's getting to it. Have to click a lot of buttons sometime. That was quick, man. Within 10 minutes, this place cleared out. So we did see black smoke. This happens after every round of votes, right? The smoke will tell the world when there is a new pope and one is not yet chosen. So, of course, if there's a majority that's been achieved and a new pope is elected, we would have seen white smoke that rose from the chimney atop the Sistine Chapel. However, that did not happen tonight. So if a majority is not met, as you see those ballot papers, they were added to a mixture of potassium chloride and sulfur to create that black smoke look. So there's a mixture of chemicals that they use in burning those ballots. There's a different recipe for those papers if there is a pope selected. So very interesting. And it was very cool to see earlier on in May, I think May 2nd or 3rd, we saw firefighters atop Sistine Chapel actually putting in that chimney as well. So interesting facts to kind of speak about before we go somewhere else, as I do believe Jerome Powell is still speaking. You want to stick with okay, we'll keep going here. So typically, of course, spectators come from everywhere, right? So you saw thousands in our shot just about 10 minutes ago, and they're all out. I think local time, it's right around 9:12. There are 9:11 p.m. there in Vatican City. So this is the first round of voting at the conclave. Just a very interesting and a really historic system that we're seeing in place that continues. So usually draws thousands, hundreds of thousands of visitors watching outside of Sistine Chapel as folks were just awaiting of the vote today. According to Forbes, actually, flight searches to Rome from the United States, they surged 345%, and that was between May 5th and May 14th. So it seems like there could be a lot of Americans over in Italy, whether they are Roman Catholics or not. I think this is a spectacle for anyone from around the world to kind of respect and to look at as well. But we do know there was a 250,000 strong crowd at the funeral of Pope Francis on April 26th. So just about 1 to 2 weeks ago. Very interesting scenes. So some other news or some other information to go along with this conclave. I did not know this, but the next pope does not have to be a cardinal. Over the last few centuries, it has been a cardinal. It's not a requirement, though. It's extremely rare in this situation. The last pope to be appointed that was not previously a cardinal was in 1378. So that tells you how long tradition has gone this way, with a cardinal being past that mantle as pope. Technically, it's possible for any baptized Catholic male to be appointed as pope. And that is coming from Time Magazine, if you're wondering where I'm getting some of these facts. Conclave, it's a Latin word, and in fact, a lot of these cardinals can speak multiple languages, including Latin. In fact, a lot of this is done behind closed doors, but it is in Latin as well. So I think that is very interesting to note, that these individuals are very educated in other languages as well. So interesting there. And yes, the Sistine Chapel, kind of the backdrop for all of this. So no pope selected on this first day, this first round of votes. But of course, this is what WCNC Plus is so good for, because when this happened, I looked over to my right, Jeb, and I saw it on our big screen here. I said, no pope, no pope. And so we had it. But it's great having developing news like this here that impacts our world that we can bring to you. So I think we're going to go to Mayor Vi Lyles. There was a press conference a little bit earlier. Oh, it's still going on. All right, so we'll join this in progress.
All right. This is always a difficult thing that you have to do, that really kind of just strains you in the way that we should behave and act and perform. But I could not let it go with the allegations made by Councilmember Watlington against this organization. They are serious, and they damage the reputation of this organization. To be clear, these allegations are unfounded. And if she has any proof, she needs to provide that to the city attorney's office, who is duty-bound to investigate. You know, we have a legal and ethical obligation in this community and this organization to follow the law. And part of my job as mayor is to lead with the facts. Not everyone may agree with that. But I tell all of us that stand here today took the oath of office. And that oath of office means a lot to this community. If I have something to say, usually I say it. I may not be the nicest way to say it, but I try my very best to put my name on it and provide facts for this community. I've lived in Charlotte since I was in college. I spent most of my adult life working for this organization that I serve. And I want you to know that I would never embarrass or harm what I consider to be the greatest city in this country. I want to address Chief Jennings. As I've said before, and often, I believe Chief Jennings to be the best police chief in this country. He has dedicated more than 30 years of his life to serving this community. And he's led what I believe with dignity, honesty, and integrity. The chief was publicly attacked by a former council member who stated his intent was to damage his reputation and end his career. I owe the chief an apology for not publicly supporting him then. I also support the men and women of CMPD who put their lives on the line every day. They too have taken an oath to uphold the law and protect our community. This council has worked with and will continue to support the men and women who protect this community. Now, we have a number of the council members behind us tonight, but I want to also recognize that Council Member James Mitchell and Council Member LaWanna Mayfield could not be here today because of illness. But I've spoken with them, and they want to share this statement on their behalf. Their statement is, "We stand with our colleagues, and we share their commitment to work with respect and honesty." And so I know that this is something that we all want to have end in a way that everyone can be agreeable, but sometimes it just doesn't work that way. So right now, what I believe is that we're going to have a review by the council members, but first I've asked the city attorney, Anthony Fox, to address what he can at this time, and then we will follow up with Malcolm Graham, Council Member Malcolm Graham. So with that, Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. North Carolina law is pretty specific in terms of the authority that it gives the city council to deal with matters. One of the specific laws deals with the ability to respect personnel privacy. When this council deals with personnel of the council or of the city, it is obligated to comply with the personnel privacy statute that maintains the confidentiality of the information that is contained within an individual's personnel file. The other body of law that's important is the ability to go into closed session, because the General Assembly has deemed it important enough to confer upon cities the ability to go into closed session for particular purposes. The law also provides that when you go into closed session, that information is confidential. It's not to be shared, and it actually imposes criminal sanctions against any individual that's found to have violated that law. Now, with regards to the matter that many of you have read about in the media and in the papers, that is a matter that was conducted in closed session. Our council has been instructed by me, and consistent with North Carolina law, not to speak about that matter, and they cannot. The other thing that controls the behavior of this council and the city is the code of ethics that this council has adopted. This council has adopted a code of ethics that requires them to conduct themselves in accordance to certain standards. That code of ethics also allows for complaints to be filed for violations. If there are allegations of violations, that code of ethics provides that those allegations can be brought to the city attorney, and then I have an obligation to investigate those violations. I have not received anything to date with regards to the information that's out there in the media requesting that investigation, but we certainly will conduct one if those are brought to my attention. Thank you.
Mr. Graham.
Good afternoon. I have enormous amount of respect for all of my colleagues that I serve with, and had the opportunity this morning on 2 occasions to speak with Councilmember Wallington. In fact, we spoke several times last week about a wide variety of city issues, many of which I agree with her on. But words matters. I've been serving as long as she has on the second tenure here on City Council for 5.5 years. A total of 20 years, including my first tenure and 10 years in the North Carolina State Senate. So I've seen a lot. Words like unethical, immoral, illegal activities, disregard for dissenting opinions, and the rule of law, they matter a lot. They echo outside of the building. They echo to potential corporations are looking to call Charlotte home, to those that we want to retain, to economic development activities, etc. Words matter. It also matters that when we go in closed door session, that we keep those conversations confidential. It is why we are here today. This is not the first time that we've had a leakage from our executive session on matters that are important. They impact the ability for the city council and the manager office to have a relationship that works, that's built on trust and transparency. Leakage matters. I also called for the mayor and the manager, if appropriate, to begin an investigation on the leak itself. I think that's really, really important because we have to remain and build trust internally in the building as well as externally in the building. It also matters how we process our work. It also matters when we disclose, what we disclose, and to the extent we can disclose. It also matters how we treat one another around the dais. It also matters how we talk about our city. Our governance in this community is strong. Our management system in this community is strong. The council members that you see standing behind me are committed to the work in an open and transparent way. I've cast thousands of votes here in Charlotte as well as in Raleigh. Sometimes I'm in the majority, sometimes I'm in the minority position. And I treat each and every vote the same because there's always another. And so the dissenting opinion, we have debates. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. But every opinion, every thought is heard. And then there's a vote. And then we move on. This is a great community, a great government staff, council members who are working full-time for part-time pay, and committed to doing the work. And do we get it right all the time? No. Are we able to correct our behavior? Yes. Are we committed to doing the work? Absolutely yes. And doing it in a way that is transparent, that is open, that is ethical, and honest. Many of the leaks, and to the media in front of me, are half-truths about a wide variety of issues, and because we cannot disclose, they go unanswered. We will do better. We will stand by this administration, this management team, and continue to do the work for the city of Charlotte. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dante Anderson. I am the Mayor Pro Tem and the representative of District 1 for the City of Charlotte. It is unfortunate that we stand before you today under the dark shade of allegations of immoral and criminal activities from a member of this body, this board of directors, for over 5.5 years. Charlotte is the 14th largest city in these United States, operating under a well-managed government with a multi-billion-dollar balanced budget. Our airport is the sixth busiest with one of the highest credit ratings possible. Our municipal and enterprise entities are regarded as gold standard among peer cities and others large and small. We should all be proud of the city government that is responsible for Charlotte, the Queen City's operations. Everyone, every entity has an opportunity and room to get better, to enhance, to be more efficient, to do better. Charlotte is no different. please be assured that the operations and the management of our city is of gold standard. In addition, I'd like to take the time to thank the Chief of Police, the deputy chiefs, the majors, and all officers of CMPD for their dedication to the safety and the lawfulness of the Queen City. Our chief stepped up when there was a void of leadership. Those with a discerned understanding of leadership leaned into those moments clear-eyed of the gravity of that role. The chief did so and saw us through a number of tenuous situations throughout the years. I want to commend the chief's leadership and express my gratitude for his dedication to the city of Charlotte.
So, not to belabor a point, I am Marjorie Molina, and I represent District 5, which is East Charlotte. Not to belabor a point, and I got notes, but I can tell you exactly what I need to say. First off, I am absolutely proud of the city that we live in, the one that we call home. And as many of my colleagues here have stated today, we have a lot to be thankful for. This news conference is overshadowing what we should be celebrating as a balanced budget that will not raise our taxes, with the highest credit rating. Again, according to who you ask and when you measure, we're the 14th or 15th largest city in the United States of America. We have the 6th busiest airport, and we have nearly 1 million humans that call Charlotte home. And words matter. How we talk about our home, how we conduct business in our home, and how we administer decisions in our home. Every person, whether you work for the city of Charlotte or you work for a private institution, has a right to privacy when it comes to work matters. And it is for that reason this conversation was held in closed session. It was not to withhold any particular information from the public. It was to respect the privacy of an employee of the city of Charlotte. I can't overstate where we were nearly 1 year ago today. We experienced one of the worst tragedies, the worst tragedy in our city's history, where 4 law enforcement officers were killed in East Charlotte, and 4 additional members of our team was wounded. And to be the leader of an institution at that time at such a high level of impact, I can't imagine what that must have been like for our chief. I remember joining them with many of my colleagues that are standing right here today, where most of our officers were in tears. Just a week ago, the Charlotte climb for Tunnel to Towers, we witnessed the widows of officers that will never see their husbands again tell us in a plea, thank our chief, they thanked our officers, they thanked our public safety officials, and they praised the city that we call home. And it is so unfortunate that just 1 year later, we're in this place right now. I still own the same level of honor and respect for every last one of the human beings that provide public safety service to our city and our region, whether that be our fire, whether that be our police or our medic, or any human that decides to step up to keep us safe. And I think many of us have to be the same way, because it's an institutional portion of what keeps Charlotte the city that she is. I I would be remiss if I didn't say that the statements released by my colleague were not extremely strong in nature. I have not spoken to her to get her sentiment or understand what her rationale was. And as the attorney mentioned, if there is something that she feels that would be in order for investigation, she has a right to come forward and make that known so that if it's warranted, an investigation can take place, and she should. But I implore the community members, not only in East Charlotte, but in our city, to know that the ones of us, all of us that stand here, we hold this honor of representing the city in very high regard. It is an absolute honor to sit here and be elected by the people that call Charlotte home and have the honor to make those decisions. And I know that we do that with integrity and with the highest honor for what we are doing and administering decisions for the fiduciary responsibility and anything else thereof. So thank you for your time today, and I think my colleague, Ms. Ajmira, will be speaking now. No, you go ahead.
I'm Dimple Ajmira, Charlotte City Councilwoman at large. I did not prepare remarks for this, but I'm going to speak from my heart. I did have an opportunity to speak with my colleague, Councilwoman Victoria Watlington. I'm here today to not attack my colleague or point fingers, but I'm here today to send a crystal clear message, because this is the right thing to do, that I stand here with the city of Charlotte and our residents. Let me assure you, there is no illegal activity or corruption going on in our city. And as the chair of the Budget, Governance, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, that is something I take it very seriously. Obviously, there are processes that we can improve on, and I have had that conversation with some of my colleagues, including Councilwoman Watlington. But we can do that by working collaboratively, without silencing anyone's voice, while working with the city attorney, the city manager's office, to ensure there is greater transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Driggs, and I serve District 7 on Charlotte City Council. Mayor Lyles, thank you on this occasion and all occasions for your even-handed leadership. We appreciate you. It saddens me for Charlotte that a member of council would use scaremongering tactics like this to draw attention to herself. I'm not aware of any foundation for Councilmember Watlington's allegations, and it is important to note that they are not supported by any specific assertions of fact in respect of which she could be held responsible. These are wild allegations. It's not even clear what they mean, but they are offered in such a way that she doesn't have to defend them. It should be noted that Charlotte City government has robust controls in place in the form of internal and external audits, as well as close scrutiny by the rating agencies that award Charlotte's debt, the highest debt rating available, AAA, based in large part on how well the city is managed. The budget process spearheaded by Manager Jones has won national awards, and of particular note, CMPD, under Chief Jennings' leadership, announced a significant decrease in crime in the city in the latest reporting period. Charlotte owes Chief Jennings a debt of gratitude for his long years of dedicated service. We are now at an important juncture in our city's history, with major initiatives underway in the areas of mobility, housing, the environment, equity, and on many other fronts that will make Charlotte a great place to live for decades to come. When I visit other cities, I always come home grateful for the many advantages we have here. There are always things we could do better, but we should never lose sight of the fact that we as a community, all of us who live here, should be proud of Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank all of you for being present here today, because this was a tough time for us to actually review and look at what our colleague, Victoria Watlington, meant by power corrupts, meant by illegal activities, meant by the level of unethical, immoral, and frankly illegal. And that's a tough thing when we have an organization like this that works so hard to improve the life for every citizen in our purview. So with this, I think that you've seen from the council members the concern that comes when we're not sure of what direction we're taking. But I commend to our public, to all of our citizens, to all of the people that work here, and that we will be people and as a council that will make sure that we pay attention to our employees and that they come first, that we achieve the goals that we set when we ask them to do this very difficult work, and that we, as a committee, as a group, as a board, however you call it, that we will work in harmony together. We'll get through this. It won't be easy, but I'm sure it can be done. Thank you very much. Now, the next statement I have is that if you would like to have an interview with any one of the council members, feel free to come up and have that opportunity. So with that, this time, I hope that you've gained something about how this community can be and how the council members believe. Thank you very much.
Fascinating press conference there, addressing claims of corruption, not just the mayor, but other city council members there, Dimple Esmerja, Ed Driggs. So we'll get the latest from Julie Kay tonight in our 4, 5, and 6 o'clock news on WCNC. But here on WCNC Plus, we'll continue to give you information on this House Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee. They're delivering on government efficiency. And this hearing is on unfair play, keeping men out of women's sports. This is ongoing right now with testimony happening now.
I mean, I have a feeling that we're going to write the statute in a way that if this is a problem when the statute becomes law, we're probably going to have some additional clauses in there that removes rights and abilities. But look, you do you.
And we will follow the law, sir.
The law is going to be punitive. I can assure you of that. We're not going to let this stand and get fixed. And anyways, I want to go back to this. So you say on your website that so Vietnam veterans are an oppressed group versus veterans. Why does a veteran of a war in Afghanistan or Iraq have, how is a Vietnam veteran oppressed?
Sir, I've actually never seen this, but I want to be clear. We have an appreciation for all of our veterans. We have many who have one individual who served our country admirably, was disabled by an IED in Iraq, and we very, very much
You need to delete
appreciate
this off your website.
all of our veterans, sir.
Without a, yeah, thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter something into the record.
Without objection.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to enter an article from USA Today entitled "Millions of People Would Lose Their Coverage Under Trump-Backed GOP Plan to Cut Medicaid." This is the CBO score that came out today. We want to talk about
Without objection. Without objection, so ordered.
Of Americans that'll lose.
We're not reading the article without objection, so ordered, just the title. I now recognize Mr. Kassar from Texas.
Madam Chairwoman, I want to start off by acknowledging that this morning, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office announced that more than 5 million Americans can lose their health care because of the Medicaid cuts being pushed by Republican members of Congress. So, of course, Republicans on the Government Efficiency Committee are holding an emergency hearing on semi-pro fencing. Not fences like the kind that goes around a building, but like the sport with the swords. And I've knocked on thousands of doors and talked to thousands of Republican, Independent, and Democratic voters in my career. And not a single time has someone flung open their door and said, "Thank God you're here, Congressman. I want to ask you about transgender people fencing." It's just never happened. I've never even met a fencer before. I've just seen it on The Parent Trap. I'm sure it's a great sport, but what the hell are we doing here? Seriously, we're here because Chairwoman Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks that if she picks on vulnerable people, like trans folks, she can avoid having a discussion about the allegations of insider trading against her. She thinks that she can distract from the fact that Trump and MAGA Republicans are raising your costs every single day, suppressing your wages every single day, stealing your taxpayer dollars every single day, and threatening your health care. That's the reason we're at this crazy hearing today. Here we are in a subcommittee supposedly about government efficiency, spending hours upon hours trashing trans people and talking about trans folks in sports. There's more members on this committee than there are trans people in all of college sports. Of the 500,000 student athletes in America, about 10 of them are trans. Not 10,000, 10. In Olympics, there are even fewer. So in my opinion, sports leagues will do a much better job than politicians up here on this committee coming up with fair and thoughtful ways of handling who does and who does not qualify for which sports. But I think that instead of picking on LGBT people, politicians in this country should be singularly focused on improving the economy for every single working American. That's my crazy idea. Ms. Goss-Graves, Republicans have called an emergency hearing on trans athletes in the sport of fencing today. Can you tell me, how many college fencers are there total in the entire United States?
I think about 1,000.
Compare that to, do you know how many people rely on Medicaid in this country?
That's more like 80 million.
And Social Security?
That's more like 70 million.
So 80 million people rely on Medicaid, 70 million people on Social Security. We're talking about 1,000 college fencers, period. How many hearings do you think this committee has held on Elon Musk pushing Social Security to the brink of collapse?
Oh my God.
I don't think any.
0 hearings. How many hearings have we had about the millions of Americans who could lose Medicaid because of the cuts Republicans are pushing today?
Well, 0.
That is correct. 0 hearings on these issues that impact us all. Republicans have called hearing after hearing obsessed with trans folks in sports, which of course only affects a tiny sliver of Americans, but no hearings on Medicaid, no hearings on Social Security, no hearings on raising wages and lowering costs. So if you're sitting at home watching, you need to know the goal of this hearing is for Republicans to distract you from their own lies, their own corruption, and their own failure. The goal of this hearing is to make sure that Fox News has something to talk about other than Elon Musk getting billions of dollars a year in government contracts while cutting services for you. The goal of this hearing is to make sure that Fox News has something else to talk about other than Chairwoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's alleged insider trading. It's a sick reality right now in American politics that right-wing Republican officials think that picking on trans people is how they'll earn more votes and raise more money. They pick on Americans that are already facing discrimination and violence, and they're making those challenges worse. They're trying to pull the oldest trick in the book. Next time you go vote, ask yourself if these second-rate schoolyard bullies are looking out for you or if they're scammers just like the man that holds their leash.
The gentleman's time has expired. It's important to point out that Democrat members today are not asking the 2 young ladies that are here representing their sports, and this is what the hearing is about today. I now recognize Chairman Comer from Kentucky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to start with a quick round of yes or no questions for each of our 4 witnesses, so please keep your answers for my first 2 questions to yes or no for time's sake. First question, do you believe biological men should compete in women's sports? Ms. Turner.
No.
Ms. McNabb,
No.
Mr. Layfelt.
If they comply with the requirements, sir.
So is that a yes or no?
It's if they comply with the requirements that have been set by our policy, they deserve to compete.
By the president's policy?
By the policy of USA Fencing.
Ms. Gray, I'm going to take that as a yes. Ms. Graves?
I agree with Mr. Layfelt that trans women should be able to compete in the sport in accordance with their gender identity.
So 2 noes and 2 yeses. Second and last question for yes or no. Should biological men be able to get scholarships to college in women's sports? Ms. Turner?
No.
Ms. McNabb?
No.
Mr. Layfelt?
They can't get them anymore, sir.
They can't get them anymore. So do you believe, yes or no, they should? You have a personal opinion on that?
I don't really have an opinion on that, sir.
Ms. Graves?
I'm actually concerned about the tens of thousands of women in this country who play college sports who have fewer scholarship opportunities than men. This would actually be a really important.
So you are concerned that a man would get a college scholarship that should go to a woman?
It's my understanding that there's less than 10 transgender women playing sports, but I know that there
Mr.
are tens
Layfelt.
of thousands of women
Mr.
who
Layfelt.
have
Sir.
fewer
On the website, I know my colleague, Mr. Timmons, talked about it. There are some troubling statements. There's a page titled, and I think he referenced it, Power and Privilege. This page promotes woke content stating that people who are white, Christian, middle class, English speaking are all privileged, and we should be asking if they're, quote, the right person to take up space or speak on certain issues. Your blog and social media posts consistently express similar views, so I assume you support the ideas on that webpage?
Sir, I'm not sure about the specific area of the webpage that you're referring to. As a board member, I focus primarily on governance, and if there's something that's operational, I stay very far away from that.
So you disavow your website?
Is it? I'm just not sure of the specific area of the website. Is it my website? Is it the USA Fencing website, sir?
The USA Fencing website.
Okay. I just am not familiar with the area that you're referring to, sir.
Okay. The reason the reason that's odd is because your blog that we looked at expresses similar views. So, because you appear to be white, English-speaking male like me. So I didn't know, there was just an odd opinion. You don't have any comment on that? You don't know anything about it?
I'm just, sir, in all honesty, I'm not following the question.
You're not following a question about the USA Fencing website that has just a lot of, concerning content on there that some would consider racist, discriminatory, or you don't have any, that's not a concern or anything?
If you link me to the specific part of the website, I could get back to you with an opinion, but I'm just not following
well,
where it is.
We'll get you a copy of your website that Mr. Timmons just referenced. So, Mr. Layfelt, let me ask a simple question. Do you support transgender women, which are biological men, competing in women's events?
If they comply with the policy, sir.
Which policy? Whose policy are you going by? What is that? Should that be the policy? Should men be allowed? You're a leader in this. Show some leadership. Should men be able to compete in women's fencing?
Sir, our policy was passed in 2022 prior to my joining the board, but right now, anybody who goes through 1 year.
Silent? So you're okay with it? You're okay with it? You don't have a problem in the world with it? You knew this hearing was coming up. You knew this was the topic of the conversation. You don't have an opinion on the policy? Are you going to change the policy?
Sir, we've passed a
policy?
contingency policy at this time. Due to the Ted Stevens Amateur Sports Act, our council has advised us that we cannot have a policy that's more restrictive than our international federation. I want to be clear that if Congress or the IOC or the FIE, our international federation, changes the policy to ban transgender participation, we will, of course, follow suit.
Well, look, I think the majority of this Congress is committed to protecting women in women's sports. NBC News poll asked, when asked if they agree or disagree with transgender women competing in women's sports, 75% disagreed. This is one of those 80-20 issues that my colleagues on the other side the hill they want to die on. So we're going to try to protect women's sports. Thank you for having this hearing, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent.
Without objection.
I'd like to enter into the record a New York Times article entitled, "The GOP Plans to Cut Medicaid Would Save Billions But Leave More Uninsured," Budget Office says. That's what we're actually outraged
Without objection,
about.
so ordered. I now recognize
Also, I want
Mr.
to point
Burchett
out that the
from
most powerful
Tennessee.
oversight Republican
You're not
Congress
recognized. Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized.
talking
Oh, I'm
about
sorry, we're going to
fencing
Crockett.
while they're trying
Okay.
to cut Medicaid.
Actually, Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized. I now recognize Ms. Crockett from Texas.
Thank you so much. It is so interesting that I just learned today at 44 years old that the Republicans are going to be the ones to save women. The same Republicans that have been, say, for women's reproductive acts, or the same Republicans that have stood for the Equal Rights Act, which would hopefully get women to equal pay, or the same Republicans that just this Congress voted for the SAVE Act, which we know would disenfranchise women from even being able to vote. But let me tell you, they are our saviors, and so I am so happy to be here today, because otherwise I would not have an idea that I had a savior in the Republicans. So let's also talk about the fact that it's only been 100 days, 100 long, terrible days for anybody that absolutely believes in reality, because what we know is that they have terminated staff responsible for enforcing federal protections against sex-based discrimination. Sounds like that's pro-women. Or they've cut funding for domestic violence survivor services. Sounds pro-woman to me. Or they've prohibited funding for research affecting women's health. That definitely sounds pro-women to me. Essentially, they closed the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. Again, sounds like they are fighting for us. And instead of providing oversight over these actions, congressional Republicans have been working to execute one of the most aggressive anti-women legislative agendas in history. And yet, they're here today trying to convince the American people that discriminating against trans people is somehow the only way to protect women. This hearing has nothing to do with improving government efficiency. It's another attempt by Republicans to distract from their demonic and disastrous policies that are making it more difficult for Americans to make ends meet. So, Ms. Goss-Graves, I want to play a game. It's called Trump or Trans. You ready?
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to tell me whether or not it is Trump or trans people that are responsible. You understand?
Got it.
Okay, very good. The first one, gutted medical research.
Trump.
Kidnapping Americans and sending them to foreign countries, AKA deporting them.
Trump.
Driving us into a recession.
Trump.
Increasing the cost of everything.
Trump.
Waging an idiotic tariff war.
Trump.
Harming farmers.
Trump.
Ignoring the Constitution.
Trump.
Proposing to take away Social Security.
Trump.
Cutting health care.
Trump.
Firing government workers who keep our country safe.
Trump.
Encouraging an environment of hate and divisiveness.
Trump.
Thank you so much. This committee could be engaged in actual oversight of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. So let's talk about waste. Like Trump's plan to spend almost $100 million for his little birthday parade, or how he spent 25% of his first 100 days golfing, costing taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. In fact, it's a little bit over 30 million at our last estimation. In fact, President Trump is on pace to spend more than $1 billion of taxpayer dollars just on golfing. Yet the Republicans have been silent. So they must think spending taxpayer dollars on the president's golfing trips is more important than providing health care to their constituents. And when I talk about constituents, we're going to talk about the ones on this committee. So if we look at Texas 26, 39,000 children look to potentially lose their Medicaid with the cuts that they are about to vote on for reconciliation. 88,000 in Georgia 3, 68,000 in Missouri 7, 79,000 in Tennessee 2, 86,000 in South Carolina 4, 50,000 in Texas 04, 85,000 in Texas 27, and in Georgia 14, 111,000. And if you add that up just on this committee, we have 606,000 kids that are relying on us to do right by them. And instead, we playing these crazy games because we worried about 10 trans folk that are in sports right now in college. I wasn't elected to be engaged in these fights. I was elected to make sure that those kids, the kids that they are about to neglect with these terrible votes that they're about to take, I was elected to protect them and to make sure that they could grow up and have all the opportunities. But let's keep on track. Now, when we look at how much they are spending on, let's look at fraud. We could investigate whether the White House and the members of this subcommittee engaged in insider trading and market manipulation. Maybe it's a coincidence that the chairwoman brought hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stock the day before Trump announced a 90-day pause on tariffs. But I guess we'll never know. So finally, let's talk about abuse. Like how the Republicans have let Elon steal data of Americans and his competitors to make himself even richer. Look, don't let these hearings distract you from their destruction. This is rage baiting instead of conducting oversight over the issues that Americans actually care about. And with that, I will yield.
The gentlelady's time is expired.
Madam Chair.
I now recognize.
Madam Chair, I move down to take down her words impugning you, as saying you committed a crime.
Without objection, so ordered.
Say what? That's not.
Second.
See how. The committee will
Point of
suspend. The
parliamentary
committee will
inquiry.
suspend.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
We're going to go with hers first.